Chapter 1442. That was why trust was so hard to come by. After being together for so long, even if he didn't contribute, he still worked hard. And even if he didn't work hard, he still felt tired, right? And yet, Sancha still didn't trust him to this extent, even bringing him to war. Jiang Wang cursed in his mind. How could there be such a sly and suspicious dog in the world? So what if he go to war without worry? Would I, Jiang Qingyang, take this chance to run away? Fine, even if I would. Then don't you want to train these calamities who are guarding your nest? How can you grow without experiencing hardships? As a friend, isn't it reasonable for me to help you test the strength of the guards on Volcano Island? Sancha suddenly turned around. Jiang Wang immediately put on a smile. The great king of calamities roared, and the black waves began to gather. Jiang Wang didn't say anything, didn't move, and didn't even observe his surroundings. It was as if he was completely loyal to the king of calamities and had no intention of running away. Speaking of which, after eating the true samadhi fire for so many days, Sancha's fur became even more glossy. As the saying went, 1 black, 2 yellow, and 3 flowers, stewing it would definitely taste, the king of calamities swung its 3-pronged tail back and forth in the air a few times. This action reminded Jiang Wang of Idiot Ash, and he felt a sense of familiarity that he hadn't felt in a long time. He really wanted to go up and kick it. Unfortunately, he couldn't. If he kicked it, his foot would be gone. The majestic king of calamity, who commanded the Calamity Army, never expected that someone would compare him to a dog that was ordinary to the point of being stupid. It simply swung its tail in a very imposing manner, and from the tip of its 3-pronged tail, a ray of light jumped out like a fish and landed not far from Jiang Wang's skin. It covered his entire body with less than a centimeter of distance. This ray of light swam around his body, fighting with the black-furred calamities around him. As far as the eye could see, the ray of light surged like the waves of the sea with a silent power. Jiang Wang could clearly sense that at this moment, the aura of this mighty king of calamity's army had completely disappeared, undetectable. Including himself, all traces of his aura had completely disappeared, as if he had put on a cloak of invisibility. No, it was much more effective than stealth. Hidden clothes wasn't able to blend into the environment while moving, but Huado's army was still able to advance under this wave of light. In his vision, the army was vast and mighty, but in his perception, nothing existed. Was this the reason why Sancha was able to lead an army to hunt down the enemy? Jiang Wang was surprised, but that was not the only thing that surprised him. He subconsciously followed the king beast calamity. Wherever the king beast calamity went, he followed. In the end, he stepped down and almost fell. When the feeling of stepping on air and falling arose in his heart, he suddenly realized that his limbs had become a part of the dim light. He could still feel his body, but every part of it had already turned into a dim light. During the entire process of his body transforming into a dim light, he was completely unaware of it. It was a very wonderful experience. He knew that nothing strange had happened to his body, and he could still feel the power of his body, the flow of his blood, and the trembling of his muscles. But at this moment, they existed in the form of a dim light. He couldn't do anything to this wave of dim light, because this wave of dim light was controlled by a single consciousness. Sancha was in control of everything, but he could also feel what the other Huado could feel. He didn't lose his 5 senses, but he couldn't use secret techniques such as immortal form, nor could he truly feel his own eyes and ears, nor could he move his lips or vibrate his vocal cords. Naturally, he couldn't make any sound. He could only see from a fixed point of view and hear with his physical body's hearing. For example, the smoke from the volcanic island, or the wind swept by the wave of dim light. For example, the dim light swam into a spatial gap. The gigantic wave of dim light seemed to have found a spatial gap in the sky and flowed in like water. Jiang Wang felt like he was a shadow, a puddle of water that flowed with the wave. He tried to sense his Tao essence. He could feel the liveliness of Tao essence in the heavenly palace, but he couldn't use it. He also couldn't use the power of his soul vessel. Jiang Wang couldn't help but speculate. If a power other than the Huodo King Beast appeared to interfere with this wave of dim light formed by the Huodo King Beast, would it be immediately scattered? Otherwise, the combined power of the Huodo King Beast wouldn't be limited to such a degree, but he couldn't test it out. Sancha had given him too many surprises. This bastard actually had the ability to move the entire Huodo King Beast army into a spatial gap. At this moment, Jiang Wang completely understood why he and Zhuguangshu were suddenly surrounded and didn't even have a chance to escape. The Huodo King Beast army had already completed their journey and ambushed them within the spatial gap, and this dim light moved without leaving any traces behind, so it would be strange if they discovered it. He then recalled the Huodo King Beast army at the time, and how they seemed to have been preparing for a long time. Their target probably wasn't them, but rather that Kuei ox. It was just that they happened to run into the Huodo King Beast's ambush. And the most infuriating thing was they even helped to chase Zhong Lian away. What kind of self-sacrificing spirit was this? They didn't ask for anything in return, saving people from trouble and sorrow. Then, today's Huodo King Beast army, with such great fanfare, what were they hunting? Was it still that Kuei ox? Or was it an even more powerful existence? Others may not know, but how could Jiang Wang not notice it? During this period of time, he had been supplying the Samadhi True Fire every day, fighting with Sancha every day, and Sancha's strength was obviously getting stronger day by day. Otherwise, how could he, Jiang Qingyang, stay in the magma lake obediently and not try to escape even once? He didn't know who the opponent Sancha had chosen this time was, and what ability they had with vague expectations. Jiang Wang passively sensed the spatial gap in the dim light. There was no scenery in this kind of place, and terrifying spatial turbulence could be seen everywhere. There were also some deep caves, and even Sancha had to guide the dim light to avoid them. Jiang Wang also saw a two-headed ape glancing at their dim light from afar, and then jumped away. What was even stranger was that one of the ape's heads seemed to have seen him and cast a disdainful look at him. It should be an illusion. In short, when they meet on the left and right, they would avoid each other. The dim light flowed on its own. Sancha obviously had no intention of entangling this space traveler. But judging from Jiang Wang's understanding of Sancha, the reason why this guy was willing to live peacefully was most likely because he couldn't catch up. This guy even wanted to hunt Kuei ox, but he failed to hunt Kuei ox, so he also surrounded a few people. If he could block this two-headed ape, how could he let it go? After that, he didn't encounter any other traveler. Jiang Wang also became more familiar with the desolate scene of the spatial gap. He could finally understand what kind of environment Qin Zhizhen was walking in, waiting for an opportunity to stab him at any time. This was also part of his knowledge. If he fought with Qin Zhizhen again, he might be able to judge the landing point of his long sword more accurately. In the state of the dim light, the concept of time became more and more blurred. Jiang Wang always divided part of his mind to time. After about 3 hours, this trip in the spatial gap finally ended. The dim light stopped at a certain position in the spatial gap, and a part of the shadow separated like a river and entered the normal space. Jiang Wang knew that there were hundreds of calamities. Then the dim light began to circle around, and in many different directions, parts of the shadow were separated. They were setting up an ambush as the chef, dear friend, and trusted partner of the King of Calamity. Jiang Wang was honored to always be in the main body of this dim light and shadow, and never separated. He was carried by the great King of Calamity and never left. Jiang Wang was very moved and chose to silently remember Sancha's art of war routine, including the choice of landing point for the ambush, the style of the ambush. It was almost impossible for him to defeat Sancha in the Mountain Sea realm. But after becoming more familiar with Sancha, it was not impossible for him to get rid of his pursuit. If Sancha was a human, he would be a famous general. The whole process of the ambush, the goal was clear, the action was straightforward, and the arrangement was completed in a few seconds. Then it was brazenly launched. Jiang Wang still did not know how it passed through the spatial barrier. It was as if the dim light and shadow just tilted slightly and naturally flowed out from a certain opening. Jiang Wang knew that if he could see the cause of this opening, he might be able to easily break through the spatial barrier. Unfortunately, he could not see the reason. It was as if he had only been absent-minded for a moment, and he had already appeared in the normal space and saw the floating mountains and jade seas. The dim light that enveloped his body dissipated, and the densely packed Calamity army spread out. Jiang Wang, who was following closely behind the king beast of Calamity, had already seen the target of this ambush. It was a strange beast that looked like a crane. It stood on a stone platform that stretched horizontally between the cliffs with 1 foot, and it looked beautiful and noble. Its body was green, but there were red spots on it. Its beak was as white as snow, and it had a sharp, cold glint. This unknown floating mountain was already filled with calamity beasts that looked like black dogs. The cliff that this bird stood on was completely surrounded, and there was no gap at all. It was obvious that this was not the first time this strange beast had been ambushed by the Calamity army. There was no surprise in its eyes, only anger. Bai Fong! Bai Fong! It shouted so loudly. Its green wings flapped, and it actually flew straight in the direction of the king beast of Calamity. Its body was as fast as lightning. The frosty white beak opened, and a flame was spat out. It expanded with the wind, like a bunch of flowers hanging upside down, and instantly spread out into a sea. Using fire to deal with Calamity, was this bird too stupid? Jiang Wang just had this thought in his mind, and he turned pale with fright. It was not only because wherever the sea of fire went, Calamity was turned into ashes. It was also because at this time he had already recognized that this bird that called Bai Fong was spitting out true Samadhi fire. But Bai Fong's true Samadhi fire was different from his. His true Samadhi fire was crimson red. Bai Fong's true Samadhi fire was also red, but it was divided into 3 layers of flames, giving birth to 3 colors. They were crimson, dark red, and light red. It was not easy to see if one did not look carefully, but how could Jiang Wang, who controlled the true Samadhi fire, not notice it? These days, he had been consuming fire lotuses every day, exhausting his true fire time and time again. The true Samadhi fire was already showing signs of turning dark red. Although it was not obvious, it still meant that the dark red true Samadhi fire might be the next form of the true Samadhi fire. But what was the situation with this bird that called Bai Fong? If the light red color was the final form of the true Samadhi fire, then why were these crimson and dark red flames preserved? At this moment, Jiang Wang had completely lost the thought of taking the opportunity to escape. He only stared at this Bai Fong bird and searched for the true essence of the true Samadhi fire. If he could truly understand the mystery of the true Samadhi fire, losing 30% of his spirit's origin was worth it. The power of the spirit could be cultivated again, and the origin of the spirit could be replenished. Supernatural powers, on the other hand, needed to be comprehended once to master all. The reason why he could use the astray supernatural power so freely was largely due to Zhuang Chengqian's personal teaching. Bu Zhou Feng was the accumulation of Yin Zhao's beak. The fire source diagram, the detailed explanation of the flame flower burning city. He had already mastered many kinds of fire element secret arts. He had never slacked off in his research on fire element, accumulating a lot of knowledge and understanding. But there was always a barrier between him and the true Samadhi fire. He felt resistance, but he did not know what it was. Today, he might have a chance to see through the fog. At this moment, how could he be satisfied with watching the fire burn across the river? He had to personally feel the flames, even if it burned his body and soul. The long sword in his hand shook, and he did not care whether Sancha understood or not. He shouted, "Don't hurt Sancha. I will fight you to the death today." He actually went against the flow of the retreating calamity beasts and charged bravely at the enemy. Sancha was stunned. It was planning to give Chef a warning before fighting the Bai Fong, so that he would not take advantage of the chaos to escape. But it did not expect this two-legged beast to be so loyal to the great king of calamity. The Baifong's fire burned everything. These calamity beasts under its command all avoided it. Only Chef went forward bravely. What kind of spirit was this? What kind of quality was this? It had really misunderstood Chef for too long and made Chef feel wrong for too long. Too many suspicions caused loyalty to be wronged. It was not qualified to be a king. Roar! The great king of calamity leaped into the air, instantly surpassing Jiang Wang, and faced the Baifong head-on. Its dignity as a king did not allow it to watch its own chef die without doing anything. Roar! Amidst the roar, it swelled up again, and just like that, blocked in front of Jiang Wang, tall and long, it opened its mouth and sucked. Half of the blazing sea of fire was instantly swallowed. Sancha's entire beast body turned red, so red that it was almost transparent, and even its bones could be seen. Poof! Its back was directly burned through, and a wisp of flame spurted out. But very quickly, a dim light blocked it again. Poof poof! 2 more holes appeared, and true samadhi fire flew out. Once again, it was blocked by the dim light. After a few times, the red light on its body actually dissipated, and its black skin and black fur shone. Sancha paused in midair and roared into the sky. Its roar was very carefree. It raised Jiang Wang for many days and used Jiang Wang at this moment. What bullshit true samadhi fire, it was just SOSO. It had long been used to eating it. Chapter 1443. Jiang Wang was already familiar with the sea of flames and the like. However, those were all ordinary flames. At most, they could only be used in the fusion of supernatural powers like the fire world, where the true samadhi fire was the source of the spell to increase its power. Spreading the pure, true samadhi fire into an ocean was a luxury that Jiang Wang didn't even dare to think about. However, Baifong turned it into reality. Only when a supernatural power seed bloomed and bore fruit could one see the true supernatural power. Observing any flame in this sea of flames, one could find that the flame was divided into 3 distinct layers. The light red was the outermost layer, the dark red layer was the inner layer, and the crimson layer was the inner layer. In Jiang Wang's perception, the light red, true samadhi fire was the fiercest and the most powerful. The crimson true samadhi fire was the most stable. The dark red, true samadhi fire was in between the two. If the final form of the true samadhi fire was a light red, then why did the true samadhi fire that Baifong spat out retain the 2 colors of dark red and crimson? Why were the flames divided into 3 layers? Jiang Wang vaguely felt that he had touched the window paper that was related to supernatural powers. He couldn't help but rush forward, wanting to get closer and see more. Even, it was not impossible for him to become friends with the Baifong if he changed sides at the last minute. As the saying goes, a fine bird chooses a tree to nest in. Everyone knew the true samadhi fire, so they might have a common language. Especially since Baifong was so beautiful, it didn't look as cunning and ruthless as Sancha. When the black shadow rushed over and blocked in front of him, it really gave him a fright. He thought that Sancha had seen through his thoughts and wanted to clean house. Fortunately, this king of calamity only seemed to focus on powerful opponents, leaving him only a back view full of power. Sancha swelled up, opened its mouth, and swallowed more than half of the true samadhi fire. Its majestic aura was soul-stirring. He couldn't help but want to praise it, but he was so anxious that he wanted to slash down with his sword. You King ate all the true samadhi fire. What am I supposed to learn? After swallowing the true samadhi fire, Sancha's body was directly burned through. How did the primordial fire burn the divine body? Of course, this process was worth studying. But before Jiang Wang could take a second look, the dim light came like a tide and quickly extinguished the flames. Sancha seemed to have gained the upper hand. It stood proudly in the sky, glaring at the Baifong bird with a white beak and a red striped body. But in the next moment, flames rose and roasted the divine body. Its black, flamboyant fur also began to burn. Although he had swallowed the samadhi true fire for many days, there was still a huge difference between each samadhi true fire. It thought that it could bear it, but in fact it couldn't. Once such a huge amount of true samadhi fire counterattacked, the dim light covering his body was instantly burned away. The bones and muscles of the trident were almost transparent for a moment, and the fine hairs could be seen immediately. Roar, roar, roar. The Huido army was enraged. Countless Huido soldiers rushed over from all directions. They were extremely ferocious and did not care about their own safety. However, the Baifeng only opened its beak and circled around its body. The true samadhi fire danced in the air like dragons and phoenixes, burning all the approaching calamities into nothingness. Huido's army never stopped, but the true samadhi fire never extinguished. The black tide surged and stopped in front of the fire. One fell after another. Their successors also died. This was an extremely tragic scene. At this moment, the Huido beasts that were silently rushing to their deaths were all creatures that knew how to slack off on the volcanic island, how to ask for benefits, and how to turn hostile. They had true feelings. Now, their will to die was not inferior to the strong human army in the modern world. However, in the face of such a tenacious Huido army, the Baifeng still maintained an overwhelming advantage. It was no wonder that in the face of a siege, the Baifeng's first reaction was not to escape, but to directly find San Cha and take the initiative to attack. It was obviously stronger than San Cha. It had also defeated San Cha more than once. Why did San Cha find such an opponent? It was a little unwise. With such a faint thought in his mind, Jiang Wang had already carried out the established plan. With the true samadhi fire surrounding his body, he walked confidently in the air and flew toward the Baifeng with a bright smile. Me, he pointed at himself and his true samadhi fire. You, he pointed at the Baifeng and its true samadhi fire. Friend, he said loudly with a bright smile. The Baifeng, floating on one leg, looked at him. There seemed to be some confusion in its eyes, but did not take the initiative to attack. Obviously, it could be communicated with. There were great benefits to being friends with the Baifeng. At the very least, this perfect, true samadhi fire could be observed and learned at any time. This bird was also beautiful, much more pleasing to the eye than San Cha. Ow! At this moment, such a cry came from behind. It was the cry that San Cha used to call him. The cry was full of anger and pain. Jiang Wang subconsciously turned back and saw San Cha, who had been burned transparent by the huge amount of true samadhi fire in its stomach, was staring at him with an angry and hurt gaze. It suddenly jumped forward, as if it wanted to rush over and kill him. But under the burning of the true samadhi fire, it staggered, couldn't stand steadily, and fell down. It was a little too ridiculous. Jiang Wang thought, humans and beasts have different paths, and the modern world is even more different. Do I have to talk about feelings with you, strange beasts? What's more, the two sides of the battle are clearly strong and weak, and the outcome is in front of me. I, Jiang Wang, don't drink a good celebratory wine. Do I have to accompany you to listen to morning songs? Moreover, what *T feelings? How could there be feelings? You evil dog, you took me back to your nest, beat me every day, forced me to spit fire, and humiliated me. I didn't stab you in the back just now, and that's enough for you. What's wrong with me being friends? Didn't you look down on me? You even spat at me. What's wrong with me being friends with the Baifeng? Jiang Wang thought fiercely as he flew towards the Baifeng. But why this evil dog's hurt gaze? He had clearly avoided it. But why was it still in front of him? He couldn't get rid of it. In the blazing sea of fire, a green cloud was born. A boot stepped on the green cloud mark. In the explosive sound of the air, the man in green had already turned around, took a few steps, shattered the green cloud, and caught up to San Cha. He opened his arms and hugged San Cha, who was burning with fire. San Cha was already filled with hatred and bit down hard on his arm. Its body and soul were burning together, and it was already in unbearable pain. but it endured the pain and bit down hard. Its canine teeth entered the flesh, and blood just flowed out, but it was burned up by the true fire. Jiang Wang sucked in a breath of cold air and slapped it on the dog's head and scolded angrily, "Ungrateful dog." This slap was as natural as slapping stupid Ash. Sancha became more and more furious, and a painful growl came from its throat. Chef not only betrayed me, but also insulted me. This hatred knows no bounds. Although it was so powerless, although it seemed like it was going to die. "I'll bite you to death, bite you to death." It bit down with all its strength and refused to let go. At the same time, in Jiang Wang's first inner residence, the red divine power seed shone brightly. He used the divine power and tried to retrieve the true samadhi fire burning on Sancha's body. The raging flames rolled back and instantly surged into Jiang Wang's body. At this moment, he immediately felt Sancha's pain. His flesh, his bones, his Tao essence, and even the power of his soul were all burning. The true samadhi fire of Bai Fong was really burning everything. Sancha bit and then stopped. How could it not feel that the true samadhi fire that tortured it to death was being diverted at a terrifying speed? How could it not feel what kind of pain this chef, who was hugging its neck, was enduring? Dim light appeared inch by inch, and its black fur became clearer little by little. Its angry, painful, and hateful eyes slowly became soft. Chapter 1444. Huidou was born with the ability to eat fire. Using it to fill its stomach, it also grew. Sancha had reared fire-breathing, two-legged beasts for a long time, and it ate true samadhi fire every day, so it was already used to this kind of fire. But it never thought that the difference between true samadhi fire and true samadhi fire could be so big. It knew that its chef was half-baked, but it didn't know that he was half-baked to this extent. They were fire from the same source. But when it swallowed it, the feeling was completely different. It stood in front of the valiant chef, wanting to show off its power, opened its mouth aggressively, and swallowed half of the sea of fire. But it didn't expect that after the fire entered its stomach, it would immediately rebel. It didn't even have time to digest it before it burned from the inside out, almost burning its soul to death. At this moment, Chef rushed forward and hugged it tightly without caring about anything else, absorbing the flames on its body, reducing its pain, and saving its life. And it was still biting Chef's arm, its sharp teeth sinking deep into his flesh. Subconsciously, it heaved a sigh of relief. There was an indescribable feeling in its heart that it had never felt before in its long life. It thought that Chef betrayed it at the last moment and wanted to be on good terms with the Bai Fong, but now it seemed that it was clearly Chef's plan. It was just that it was too badly injured, so Chef had to give up the plan and turn back to save it. It looked at Chef's painful and hideous expression under the flames. It looked at the flames that kept coming out of Chef's eyes, ears, mouth, and nose. Sancha was touched and ashamed. It leaned over, curled its tongue, and gently licked the flames away. As the king of calamity in a mountain sea realm, this was probably a rare moment of warmth in its life. But for Jiang Wang, the experience wasn't very good. Sancha didn't have the habit of washing its teeth, so when it curled its tongue, it almost fainted from the smell. More importantly, now was not the time to make friends. Sancha was still wasting time here. When the Bai Fong slaughtered the entire Huidou army, it would have no chance of victory. Jiang Wang looked back in disdain, cursing, "What are you licking? I just want to personally explore the profound meaning of true samadhi fire. It has nothing to do with a damn dog like you. Get lost." He pushed Sancha away, fell back under the flames, and fell from the sky. "Kill it." In the end, he pointed at the Bai Fong and roared. This time, Huidou understood. It remembered. That was what Chef had shouted when the two-legged beasts came to attack him. Roar. It roared furiously. Chef had sucked away more than half of the true samadhi fire, and it was able to suppress and digest the rest. The power of fire eating, using fire to refine the body. The dim light around his body became denser, and the fur on his body became smoother. Chef fell weakly behind it. It stared fixedly at the Baifeng. Its vigorous body swept across the sky, stomping on the air. It closed in on the Baifeng, who was standing with a single horn, and swung its claw. It was like a saber wielder who had held his saber for 10 years. When he attacked, he cut down a peerless sharpness. The sharp claws that popped out of the meat pads tore through space, broke through the flames, and pounced towards the neck of the thief bird in front of him. In the midst of the raging flames, 5 extremely thin black lines suddenly appeared. Even the raging flames were cut apart. That was a spatial crack. Baifeng. The Baifeng called out its name. It hovered in the air and pecked. This peck was like pulling out a treasured sword from a dark room, shining with a cold light for 1,000 years. Its white beak, like frost and snow, accurately pecked at the black lines. It was like pecking at a few small insects, and the spatial crack was also broken apart by the peck. This was an inconceivable exchange of blows. 1 claw and 1 peck in an instant. It was exquisite to the extreme. Even a fight between a saber wielder and a swordsman at the peak of God's descent wouldn't be comparable. Leaping high into the sky, the trident twisted its body, its long tail whistling like an iron whip, straight towards the bird's head. But the Baifeng spread its wings and folded them in front of its body, using its feathers as a shield to block this sweep. Clang! It was like the sound of metal. The Baifeng was pushed back several feet. The trident didn't stop after gaining the upper hand, and roared again. The Huidou army that surrounded this place roared in unison. Their voices shook heaven and earth. The dim light on the bodies of the countless Huidou soldiers all left their bodies. The Huidou soldiers that had left their bodies instantly became dispirited, almost losing their ability to fight. But the dim light that had gathered surged forward like a tide, covering all 4 directions, tightly encircling the sea of true fire that the Baifeng had spat out. The true Samadhi fire burned the dim light, but the dim light also extinguished the true fire. But the dim light's consumption depended on this endless Huidou army, gathered under the command of the King of Calamities, while the Baifeng only had itself. No matter how strong it was, it couldn't exhaust all of them. The sea of true fire kept shrinking, while the dim light kept getting closer. This process was slow at first, but it was resolute, and then it became faster and faster. The situation of victory and defeat had been reversed. The Baifeng wasn't an idiot. Seeing that the situation wasn't good, it flapped its wings and took to the sky. The true Samadhi fire could burn anything. This was where its confidence came from despite being outnumbered. But now that it couldn't burn the Huidou king beast, under the command of the King of Calamities, even the dim light couldn't break through. It decided to retreat. No matter what, it had the freedom to fight or not as it soared in the sky. But it had only risen a few dozen feet when a spatial fluctuation came from above. A dim light flowed out like water, and with a twist, the trident appeared high in the sky. It looked down at the Baifeng from above, its eyes filled with killing intent, then leapt down and swung its claw. This dodge was too sudden, this claw too fast. The Baifeng couldn't dodge, so it used its beak to meet the attack. This time, it was like an angry spear piercing through the sky, a cold glint breaking through the saber light. It was fast, dangerous, and precise. The white beak and the black claw clashed, then separated. The Baifeng didn't want to continue fighting. It turned its wings and flew to the left. But another dim light flowed out from the space in front of it. The trident materialized and clawed at the Baifeng again. With a terrifying screech, the winged saber and the claw clashed. This time, the Baifeng retreated even further, obviously greatly exhausted, unable to keep up with the trident that could constantly replenish itself from the Huidou army. The Baifeng used the momentum to turn around, first diving towards the blue sea, then suddenly pulling up, rising into the sky once more. But the trident wasn't affected. The dim light's landing point was very accurate, still blocking the top. This time, both of its claws slashed out at the same time. With the trident's craftiness, since it chose to surround and kill the Baifeng today, of course it was prepared. It was just that it was in a hurry to succeed at the beginning, which was why it almost failed. Now that it slowly turned around, it mobilized the power of the Huo army, firmly suppressing the Baifeng. It had never received any military inheritance, but it had figured out the military formation by itself. It was able to command the huge Huo army as it wished. The ambush point it had set up in the space crack was the place where the dim light suddenly flowed to. It consciously only gave the Baifeng the space to escape. For a long time, the Baifeng's true samadhi fire burned everything, and it was also extremely fast, leaving as it pleased. It couldn't keep up with the Baifeng's speed, so it mobilized the power of the Huo army, using its innate dim light power to mimic the form of a formation, simulating the ability to cross space. It couldn't block the Baifeng's true samadhi fire, so when it encountered a two-legged beast that could use the true samadhi fire, it quickly caught it and tamed it, even feeding it with precious deep-sea fire lotuses. It had prepared for a long time for this battle with the Baifeng. How could the heavens let it down? Today should be the day to reap the results. The trident's claws fell together, flashing with cold light, intersecting with each other. The Baifeng was also ruthless. Not only did it not dodge, but it spread its green feathers, increasing its speed by a few degrees. Its sharp white beak pointed directly at the trident's neck. It instantly became a battle of life and death. It didn't know what it meant to fight on a narrow path. It only knew that if it didn't force this Huo beast king away, the more it would consume, the less chance it would have to escape. So it fought with its life. The trident was silent at this time, silently, increasing its speed. Its eyes were filled with cold light. It didn't dodge or avoid, directly colliding with the Baifeng. It was afraid that it wouldn't be able to catch the Baifeng, so it wasn't afraid of fighting with its life. It was willing to fight with its life. It would depend on who was faster at the moment of life and death. Would its sharp claws smash the Baifeng's head first, or would the Baifeng's sharp beak pierce its neck first? Life and death depended on the moment. Who would live and who would die? Baifeng. In the end, the Baifeng was unwilling to fight. It suddenly opened its beak, a stream of true samadhi fire like a waterfall, engulfing its opponent. Roar! The trident opened its mouth. A dim light shrouded its throat, swallowing the fire directly. The dim light and the true fire consumed for a while. Then the trident swooped down, swallowing the true fire into its stomach. It had already digested the true samadhi fire. It already had an understanding of the Baifeng's fire. At this moment, it was fearless. Its vigorous body stretched out in midair. As it swallowed the fire, it pounced on the Baifeng. Its claws pressed down on the green wings. There was still burning true fire in its mouth. However, it tilted its head and bit the Baifeng's neck. Baifeng! The Baifeng screamed, blood splattering in the air. Every drop of blood exploded into flames in the air. Drop by drop, flower by flower, it was like rain. The two sides tangled together, falling down. How high were the hovering mountains in the mountain sea realm? Jiang Wang hadn't climbed any of them, so he didn't have an idea. But when he pushed the trident away and fell alone, he felt that the distance was very far. The distance was lengthened by the pain. He relied on the divine ability seed in the first inner residence to forcefully absorb the Baifeng's true samadhi fire. When the first wisp of fire entered his body, he instantly felt pain. It was the long-awaited pain of being burned by fire. Ever since he took down the divine ability of the true samadhi fire, no matter where he was, no matter what kind of Tao technique he encountered, fire had never hurt him. Even if he was lying unconscious in the lava lake, his body that controlled fire would not be hurt by the lava. Not to mention the divine ability of the true samadhi fire enveloping him. Now, even if he was placed in the sea of fire without any protection, he would not be hurt at all. But when he touched a wisp of the Baifeng's true samadhi fire, he curled up in pain. He could clearly feel how his flesh and blood were burned, how his Tao essence returned to nothingness, and even how the power of his spirit disappeared. The process was very fast. He originally planned to use the divine ability of the same origin to devour all the true samadhi fire. He originally thought that he had cultivated the fire origin picture book, possessed the divine ability of the true samadhi fire, and was proficient in fire Dao techniques, and that his body could completely withstand the Baifeng's true samadhi fire. But when he swallowed the first wisp, the flames came out from his eyes, ears, nose, and mouth, as if they were going to burn his entire body and burn him to ashes. He had no choice but to immediately use his backup plan. He activated the divine ability seed and quickly mobilized his true samadhi fire, using fire to contain fire. He used his single scarlet flame to envelop the 3 layers of flames from the Baifeng. On the outermost layer of his single scarlet flame, he covered it with the divine ability light of the true samadhi fire. This temporarily stopped the spread of the true samadhi fire, giving him time to push the trident away. He no longer had any extra mental energy to control his body and could only let his body fall into the sea. He prayed from the bottom of his heart that there would not be a sea beast looking for food. At this moment, the scene in the 5 prefectures' sea was magnificent. The huge amount of true samadhi fire from the Baifeng was wrapped up in layers, compressed into a huge fireball, and fell into the 5 prefectures' sea. It was a boundless, raging fire that was divided into 3 layers. It was gathered by Jiang Wang with his greatest effort and determination. The scarlet true samadhi fire was used as an outer layer to envelop the boundless true samadhi fire. The divine ability seed in the first inner residence was activated to its limit. That was why so much scarlet divine ability light poured down, tightly enveloping the outermost layer, preventing this fireball from exploding. From afar, it looked like a huge, burning fireball was falling. Just like the scene in the red mirror, the sun had fallen into the sea. Of course, Jiang Wang could not let it fall. He clenched his teeth and held on. If the 5 prefectures' sea dried up just like that, there would be no hope for his Dao path. The Baifeng's true samadhi fire was temporarily enveloped. That endless heat wave was something that Jiang Wang's true samadhi fire and divine ability light could not block out. The entire 5 prefectures' sea's surface actually sank. It's so hot. It's so hot. The child of the clouds dashed out of the ruins of the cloud-top palace with an agility that did not match his body size, and jumped into the sea with a splash. The towering trees on the isolated island of heaven and earth, which were full of vitality, instantly withered. Jiang Wang's body was falling. The trident was already charging towards the Baifeng, but he had no time to watch the battle, because his true samadhi fire was also burning. The true fire was being burned by the true fire. His flesh and blood were burned and instantly withered. The power of his spirit disappeared, leaving only endless pain. Only after his divine ability fire was ignited did Jiang Wang finally clearly feel the process of being burned by the true samadhi fire. That feeling was hard to describe. He had never relaxed his exploration of the true samadhi fire. Being able to use the true samadhi fire as the foundation to create the fire world technique was enough to show his control of this divine ability. It was precisely because he had such a deep control of this divine ability that he could see the process of the true fire being burned so clearly in the 5 prefecture sea. The boundless sea was already boiling. The shield formed by the true samadhi fire and the samadhi divine ability light had already been burned through many small holes. Wisps of thin flames leaped out, burning everything in their path. Good fortune azure cloud, the ruins of the cloud-top palace, the ocean of the 5 prefectures, sea. Jiang Wang's soul appeared and was hidden in the first inner mansion. He sat cross-legged under the crimson divine ability seed, enduring the pain of being burned and observing carefully. He had to see more clearly. He had to see more. In the vast 5 prefectures sea, the crimson mansion hung high in the sky, barely supporting the samadhi divine ability light, while the rest of the inner mansion was hidden. The fireball in the sky was about to explode. Suddenly, a crimson gold mansion jumped out. It was right above the burning fireball. It instantly froze. With the red heart town's samadhi, the crimson gold immortal divine ability light fell, repairing the hole that the samadhi divine ability light had burned through. Of course, the current red heart was not really immortal. The crimson gold divine ability light lasted for a while before it was burned by the Bai Feng's true fire. In the 5 prefectures sea, flying flames were everywhere. Everything was heading towards destruction. Outside his body, the blazing flames once again drilled out of his 7 orifices. They even pierced out of every pore. The raging flames burned his body, instantly turning him into a burning man. Blood, muscles, bones, Tao, essence, soul, divine ability, light. Everything that the true samadhi fire touched was burning. In this trance of life and death. Plop! Jiang Wang fell into the boundless blue sea, but his body was still like firewood, burning with raging flames. The true samadhi fire ignited the seawater and quickly spread, and in the raging flames of the burning sea. However, there was a pair of crimson gold eyes that became brighter and brighter, until the swaying flames in his eyes pierced through the blue sea red flames and shot into the clouds. Chapter 1445. What was fire? Fire was the light produced when an object burned. Fire was scorching, brilliant, radiant, and full of life. Fire was even the beginning of civilization. From the end of history to the present day, one could always see the flickering of fire. Countless ideas and paths of Tao were born from it. Perhaps they were all correct. After all, the myriad paths of Tao obscure one's vision. When I see the Tao is different. The sages of the past had already explained that there were myriad paths of Tao. Of course, fire could also be interpreted in myriad ways. The fire origin atlas passed down from the floating continent's Qing Hua clan had a unique interpretation of fire. Fire was just fire. Fire was one of the elemental energies that made up this world. All other concepts were just attachments to fire, not fire itself. The people of the floating continent only saw pure fire as a totem. They didn't even acknowledge the existence of a god of fire, or that there was a great will that could represent fire. Because God has me, and I must have private thoughts. Jiang Wang had always remembered these words. He had always used fire in this way. His experience on the floating continent wasn't very long, but it had left a deep impression on him. He kept a respectful distance from the divine Tao, and similarly didn't respect the so-called great will. He never worshipped fire as a god, only fire as fire. Why could fire boil water? Why could fire melt wood and iron? Of course, it was because of the high temperature. The hotter the flame, the faster the water would boil, and the more iron would melt. He had always been pursuing even more terrifying temperatures, but there was a limit to his cultivation. Previously, when his opponents weren't paying attention, he could burn them to ashes with his samadhi true fire. But as he became more and more famous, more and more people learned about him and understood him. The samadhi true fire fell into a predicament where it was very difficult to achieve anything. After being on guard against it, the power of a cultivator was naturally harder to melt than iron. Jiang Wang had always been trying to solve the predicament of the samadhi true fire, but he was limited by his strength and experience. After all, he wasn't born with knowledge. He had never seen a senior who was proficient in using the samadhi true fire, nor had any senior taught him how to cultivate divine arts. He didn't have a divine art inheritance like the Chongqing clan. It was even more impossible for him to take out his divine art seed and ask someone to analyze it for him. All this time, he had been exploring alone and advancing slowly. The development of the fire world was, of course, a path. If one day the entire fire world could be formed by the true samadhi fire, and not just the core flame that ignited life, the power of the fire world would be unimaginable. However, with Jiang Wang's current realm, it was impossible for him to accumulate so much true samadhi fire. Even if he squeezed all the divine power seeds dry, he still wouldn't be able to do it. Perhaps he could succeed on this path, but the merit was in the future. This time, he had encountered the Bai Feng in the mountain and sea realm, and had personally been burned by its flames. Only then did he know what the true samadhi flame was. He took a huge amount of true samadhi fire into his 5 prefectures sea and burned his Tao essence, good fortune, green cloud, flesh and blood, and the power of spirit. He burned everything he had in order to see the truth of Baifeng's true samadhi fire. For this reason, he was prepared to die in the mountain and sea realm. As he was about to be incinerated, he finally saw the true meaning. His fire elemental Tao techniques were powerful because of the fire origin chart. In fact, the fire origin chart was also a key factor in the creation of the fire world technique. However, he was also shackled by the fire origin chart from the void continent. Fire was, of course, fire itself, and one of the elemental energies that constructed all things. This was, of course, the unquestionable truth. But fire wasn't just fire. Those symbols, those concepts, and the so-called attachments that the void continent disdained were also fire. They weren't meaningless. And the true samadhi fire wasn't just true samadhi fire. The Baifeng's true samadhi fire was fundamentally different from the path he had always taken. When Jiang Wang's true samadhi fire was ignited, the first thing he felt wasn't the terrifyingly high temperature that ignited his flames, but the instant his divine power flames were disintegrated by the Baifeng's true samadhi fire. Thus, the foundation of all existence was disintegrated. Of course, it also lost the possibility of defense. Only then did it turn into firewood for the raging flames. Divine power flames couldn't be burned, but after being disintegrated, the fire was still firewood. The Samadhi divine power light, the Crimson Heart divine power light, and even the Tao essence and good fortune green cloud that served as the medium for immortal arts were all like this. Jiang Wang had always believed that the essence of the true Samadhi fire lay in true fire. In fact, it only lay in fire. This was the principle that he realized when he cultivated the fire source diagram, and it was also the shackle left behind by the fire source diagram. Now, he suddenly realized that at least for the Baifeng, the core of the true Samadhi fire lay in Samadhi. What was Samadhi? It was the essence of all things, the origin of all things, and the true essence of all things. Seeing it, seeing through it, then disintegrating it, then burning it. The human world could be divided into 3, heaven, earth, and man. The sea of stars could be divided into 3, sun, moon, and stars. Space could be divided into 3, top, middle, and bottom. Time could be divided into 3, past, present, and future. Everything in the world could be divided into 3. This 3 wasn't 3, but infinity. Tao gave birth to 1, 1 gave birth to 2, 2 gave birth to 3, and 3 gave birth to all things, even infinity. Why couldn't the true Samadhi fire burn everything? With the Samadhi fire broken down, naturally, everything could be burned. With the Samadhi fire broken down, wasn't it precisely knowledge? The process of breaking down and breaking down was precisely the completion of knowledge. The first inner mansion and the second inner mansion, the true Samadhi fire and the wrong path, could actually be so intimate. With just this bit of understanding, the Tianfu physique could be more complete, and the light of the 5 divine abilities could be more flexible. With a thought, 100 things could be achieved. The fog that shrouded the true Samadhi fire was gently blown away amidst the unimaginable pain. Jiang Wang felt a sense of satisfaction. This was the knowledge of the path of Tao, surpassing pain. In the 5-mansion sea, the first inner mansion, second inner mansion, and 5th inner mansion were all activated. The wrong path was hidden to supplement knowledge, and the red heart divine ability light and the Samadhi divine ability light were mixed together, locking the flames that filled the sky. The red true Samadhi fire that was originally burned to the point where only remnant flames were left suddenly soared up like a dragon, roaring and churning the 5-mansion sea. It once again surrounded the true Samadhi fire that belonged to the Baifeng, and then ignited it. Jiang Wang used the red heart to control the true Samadhi fire, using fire to burn fire. Even if he understood the true meaning, Jiang Wang's current true Samadhi fire was of course far inferior to the Baifeng's true Samadhi fire. But this was Jiang Wang's five-mansion sea. Everything that was being burned was also everything that supported Jiang Wang's existence. The Baifeng's true samadhi fire was ultimately a tree without roots. After Jiang Wang understood its true meaning, it could no longer do anything. But Jiang Wang's true samadhi fire had unlimited support, unlimited firewood. With the experience of being burned from the inside out and the replenishment of the wrong path's divine ability, he had already grasped the samadhi. When he gathered his strength and burned the first wisp of true samadhi fire that belonged to the Baifeng, the situation was reversed. This triple blazing fire turned into a pure red color, falling back into the huge fireball. Like a spark falling into a pot of oil, it suddenly spread out. In an instant, the spark had started a prairie fire. The red true samadhi fire replaced all the triple blazing fire, resounding throughout the five-mansion sea. He had completely turned the Baifeng's true samadhi fire into his own. But there were too many true fires, and this power was too powerful. Jiang Wang's current divine ability seed was not enough to completely contain it. Such a terrifying power expanded in the five-mansion sea, almost exploding. Under the suppression of the red heart divine ability and the mobilization of the true samadhi fire divine ability, it left in an orderly manner. Therefore, the flames in his eyes were tens of thousands of feet long, and the clouds surged into the sky. This was an unimaginable scene. In the sky, two powerful strange beasts were fighting to the death. Their auras were entangled in one place, causing ripples to appear in the space. The aftershocks rippled for hundreds of miles. The strange beast that was as big as a galloping horse pounced on the green-feathered and white-beaked Baifeng. Its claws pressed down on the Baifeng's wings. The flames in its mouth had not extinguished, but its fangs had already bitten the Baifeng's neck. The dim light and the raging flames clashed at the tips of its teeth, fighting fiercely. At this moment of life and death, the Baifeng no longer held back. Its flames seemed to burst out from the depths of its soul. It pierced through its skeleton, through its flesh, and jumped onto its wings. Finally, it burned this divine body. It cried out sternly, "Baifeng!" The raging flames covered it and also covered the Calamity Beast King that was pouncing on it. This crazy true fire spread out in the sky like a cloud of fire. Two powerful strange beasts rolled in the cloud of fire. The trident turned into a dim light, but it could not keep up with the spreading speed of the true samadhi fire. The dim light shrank, and the raging flames burned brighter. The raging flames disintegrated its fur and flesh. The Baifeng knew that it could not escape, but it used its own soul as firewood, determined to perish together with the Calamity Beast King. What made the surrounding Calamity Beasts roar was their king had no intention of avoiding it all. Its claws were still pressing down on the Baifeng's wings. Its teeth were still biting the Baifeng's neck. The two fell together and burned together. At this moment, endless flames rushed into the sky. The true samadhi fire that swept across the sea instantly retracted. Along with the flames in Jiang Wang's eyes, it majestically pierced through the sky and directly collided with the two strange beasts that were entangled. Using flames to burn flames. Using the Baifeng's true samadhi fire to burn the Baifeng's true samadhi fire. The endless flames disintegrated and withered together. The fire cloud that enveloped the sky for hundreds of feet actually shrank rapidly. The dim light on the trident's body shone brightly. It closed its sharp teeth, gritted its teeth, and swung its tail. The Baifeng with a green body, red patterns, and white beak was beheaded just like that. After its vitality dissipated, its body could no longer resist the true samadhi fire. It was swept away by the flames and disappeared without a trace. Jiang Wang crossed the sea and waved his hand. The flames that swayed everywhere on the sea dissipated. The world of fire that almost covered his vision was gently wiped away by him, just like that. The clear sky and the blue sea returned. A drop of blood flowing with flames fell from the sky and fell in front of him. Jiang Wang reached out and caught it. This was the Bai Fong's blood essence. Holding it in his hand, he looked around. In the eyes of the surrounding calamity beasts, Jiang Wang saw for the first time, other than hunger and disdain, reverence. Of course, the trident's gaze was different. Its gaze was very intimate. But while looking at Jiang Wang with an intimate gaze, it was also chewing on the Bai Fong's remaining bird head. It had been almost burned by the true samadhi fire, but after all, the skull was still left. Jiang Wang didn't know what to say at this moment. He could only raise his hand and treat it as a greeting. The trident chewed the Bai Fong's skull into small pieces and swallowed it slowly. Then it shouted "Ayo!" This time, it was more gentle than any of the previous times. It was as if it was calling for its family. "Hello, trident," Jiang Wang responded. Seeing that it didn't mind, he put this drop of Bai Fong's blood essence into the storage box. The trident turned around and stepped into the air. It went alone to the floating mountain that they fought all the way down. There was a subtle emotion. Jiang Wang didn't know why, but he sensed it. The trident was close to him, but at this moment, the trident was not happy. Why didn't he feel happy after killing the Bai Fong? He subconsciously followed behind the trident. Maybe it was because it was used to being tamed by the trident, or maybe it was because it cared about the trident. Who knows? More than half of the Huainu army was scattered everywhere. They didn't mourn and silently licked each other's wounds. The trident's goal was very clear. It stepped straight into the air and soon arrived at the cliff where the Bai Fong stopped. Under the natural stone platform, there was actually a stone cave hidden. The stone platform looked like a door-eave. The trident walked in directly. Jiang Wang followed closely behind. This was obviously the Bai Fong's nest. Was there a treasure that the Bai Fong guarded? Was it the inheritance of Huang Weizhen? Or was it the mystery of God's arrival? The seal of the 9 phoenix? While walking in the cave, Jiang Wang thought of many possibilities. But he didn't expect that when he walked into the depths of the cave with the trident, all he saw was dense white skulls. There were only skulls. They belonged to different strange beasts and seemed to be part of the Bai Fong's collection. The trident rummaged through the mountain of skulls and picked out a small dog head. It silently put it in front of itself and licked it with a sad expression. Seeing this, Jiang Wang suddenly understood that was the trident's child. The trident led its army to kill the Bai Fong today, not to fight for anything or prove anything, but to take revenge that it had been preparing for a long time. He could almost imagine that scene. The fire-eating Huainu and the fire-controlling Bai Fong were natural enemies, constantly fighting. One day, the powerful Bai Fong flapped its wings and spat out the true samadhi fire that could burn anything, burning countless Huainu to death. It picked up a fresh cub and returned to its nest to slowly savor it. Of course, its posture was beautiful, even elegant, and, as usual, it left behind a collection. But this time, the cub's father, or mother, decided to take revenge. It furiously trained itself, quickly grew to become the king of the Huainu army, trained and controlled the Huainu army. Wherever the army passed, not even a blade of grass grew. It patiently trained the 2-legged beast, feeding it precious fire lotuses so that it could quickly adapt to the true samadhi fire. Everything was for today, including its previous attempt to hunt the Kuei cow, presumably because the Kuei cow also had something on it that could deal with the Bai Fong. Looking at the trident that was silently licking the cub's skull, Jiang Wang fell silent. Although there might not be any right or wrong between the strange beasts. But at this moment, he was very glad that he made a choice that was sincere in his heart in the previous battle. Otherwise, he really didn't know how to face this scene. Roar! The trident suddenly cried out again. Jiang Wang looked at it. It gently pushed the cub's skull inwards, then raised its claws and swept across the densely packed skulls, then looked at Jiang Wang and made a blowing gesture. Jiang Wang raised a flame with his finger and tentatively sent it forward. "Do you want me to burn them?" It was unknown whether the trident understood his action or his words, but it took a step back and nodded. Jiang Wang gently flicked his finger, and the true samadhi fire jumped out and burned fiercely. In an instant, all the skulls, including the Huainu cub, were burned to ashes. The trident took a last deep look here, then turned around and walked out. When it walked to the entrance of the cave, it stopped and looked at Jiangwang. Jiangwang looked at it, not knowing what it meant. At this time, the trident had returned to its normal size, like a smooth little black dog. It slowly came over, put its head under Jiangwang's palm, and gently rubbed it. Chapter 1446. It turned out that the trident had always known that Jiangwang wanted to rub its head, of course. It wouldn't work in the past. If a mere chef dared to overstep his boundaries, he would probably end up eating everything. Now it was different. The two of them could already be considered humans? Friends. It didn't know how to express its closeness, so it leaned over and let him rub its head. The reason why it did this in the cave was naturally because its dignity as a king didn't allow it. If its subordinates saw this scene, it would really dive into the magma pool. The great king of calamities lowered its head and asked for a rub. Jiangwang was really flattered. He carefully rubbed it, then again and again. Needless to say, the trident's fur was smooth and soft. When rubbing this dog's head, it felt quite extraordinary. The most important thing was that style. This was the king of calamities who ruled countless calamities on Volcano Island. It was an overlord who had just killed the Bifong. Its strength was completely comparable to a divine Advent realm cultivator. In this mountain sea realm, where experts were as common as clouds, it could also do whatever it wanted. Who was qualified to rub its head? If this was told, no one would dare to believe it. Jiangwang floated there amidst the clouds and mist, enjoying the unique glory of the mountain and sea realm. The trident also narrowed its eyes slightly. In a vast mountain and sea realm, this cavern had a rare moment of peace. Not long after, the trident took a few steps back and left Jiangwang's palm. It looked up at Jiangwang, opened its mouth, and gently spat out a drop of blood with a dim light. It flew in front of Jiangwang. Jiangwang caught it in confusion. For me, the trident didn't say anything. It turned around and walked out of the cave. Jiangwang still subconsciously followed behind it. Roar! The trident let out a majestic roar, and the calamities scattered in different places began to gather. The army gathered, and the black tide surged. But this time, the flowing dim light didn't envelop Jiangwang's body. The dim light was like a tide, flowing into the spatial gap, and also disappeared in front of Jiangwang's eyes, until the sky was quiet and the sea was calm. Only then did Jiangwang suddenly realize he was free. As smart as Sancha was, of course, he knew Chef wanted to escape every day. Chef did not like to stay on Volcano Island. Huido's army came like the tide, and then retreated like the tide. Jiangwang was like a seashell swept up by the waves, stranded alone on the beach. There was a sense of loss and frustration. He originally thought that after he comprehended the mysteries of the Samadhi true fire and was able to use a stronger version of it, the trident would keep a closer eye on him. After all, the chef's culinary skills had improved. Who would have thought that the great king of calamity would have such a soft side? The drop of Huido's blood essence was Sancha's final gift. Jiangwang held it in his palm, speechless for a long time. All living things in the world, all spiritualists have emotions. If beasts were like this, how could humans endure it? From this moment on, Jiangwang no longer considered whether the mountain sea realm was real or fake. If your experience is real, if your feelings are real, then it is real. Be honest with your heart and be loyal to your feelings. Then what does everything in the world mean to me? It doesn't matter if it is real or fake. Praise or slander, glory or humiliation. I will do it myself. At this moment, he felt a long-lost throbbing. He could not help but look up at the sky. There were no stars or moon in the sky, and of course, he could not see the light of the distant stars. But the power of the Starlight's sacred tower could still be projected here. He could feel how lonely the Aliyah star tower that belonged to him was. It transmitted his vague understanding of the Tao path to the vast universe, explaining and developing it bit by bit. He had always been able to see that path. When the Bifong Samadhi true fire wreaked havoc in the 5 palace seas, burning the body and soul and penetrating the heart. He had already seen it clearly, but he could not leave yet. That was the most free and also the most dangerous path. So he had to be more careful. Although there was an urgent need to increase his combat strength now, he should focus on the future. It was more important to go far than to go fast. More preparations were needed before it could be done, but now he could at least build another star tower. The outer mansion realm was not the inner mansion realm. He did not need to complete every inner mansion before opening the next one. The Starlight Sacred Tower had been standing in the universe for a long time, and it needed to be constantly changed and sculpted. The star towers stood side by side, influencing each other and promoting each other's growth. It was not an easy task to build a star tower in the Mountain Sea realm. If the Star Moon Plain was the easiest place to build a star tower in the modern world, then the Mountain Sea realm, which was isolated from the stars, would definitely be more difficult to build a Starlight Sacred Tower than most places in the modern world. Because in such a place, it was impossible to reach the distant stars. Ordinary outer mansion cultivators, even if they could still summon the power of the Starlight Sacred Tower, would not be able to do anything in the distant stars in this state of deafness and blindness. But Jiang Wang had been very confident since the beginning, when he was still a chef on Volcano Island, because his Alioth Sacred Tower was located in the core area of the Alioth star. The position of the anchor in the distant stars could not be clearer. And because of this, the Alioth Sacred Tower, which had sealed the forest sea dragon god, had an endless supply of power that could extend into the distant stars. In addition, he had already memorized the secret technique of the 7-star Sacred Tower. Even if he could not see or hear it, he still knew where the second star tower he chose was. Furthermore, it was not impossible to see it. At this moment, outside the Baifeng's cave, Jiang Wang looked up at the sky. He originally thought that he would build a second star tower on Volcano Island as a preparation to escape the clutches of the Trident Devil. But today, his cultivation and state of mind had reached a certain level. There was no need to delay. When the conditions were right, success would come naturally. The Big Dipper had 7 stars, and Jiang Wang's first star tower was in the Alioth star. For the freedom and the most dangerous path, he chose the second star tower today. The star was close to was the 6th star in the Big Dipper, named Mizar. In the distant stars, a green stone tower stood alone, emitting endless light. Bright starlight spanned hundreds of millions of miles, from the Alioth star to Mizar. The Sun-High Dragon God slammed into the stone prison at the base and shouted, "Silly, silly little brother, I can't bear to see Tianjiao covered in dust. Stop this cheap technique. I'm going to teach you the technique of the Dragon Emperor Sacred Tower." At this moment, all of his power was drawn, so of course he would say that he was silly. Jiang Wang turned a deaf ear. At this moment, his soul could not manifest in the Alioth Star Sacred Tower, but in the Mountain Sea realm, his eyes changed. They were brilliant, immortal golden eyes, and there were also crimson flames in them. First, under the pressure of the Baifeng's true Samadhi fire, he comprehended Samadhi at the boundary between life and death. Then he instinctively released the true Samadhi fire with the Eye of Qianyang, helping Huido to kill the Baifeng. In that natural state, this brand new secret technique was formed. The Red Heart technique, the true Samadhi fire in the Eye of Qianyang. It was the Qianyang Red Eye. The core power was naturally in the left eye, and the right eye was temporarily in existence that stored backup power. The Candle Dragon opened his eyes, and the sky was bright. There were no stars in the Mountain Sea realm. However, Jiang Wang still wanted to use the Qianyang Red Eye to see the wonders of the Star Tower. His gaze used the Alioth Star Tower as a transition point. He saw the depths of the universe through the starlight. It was a place with endless darkness and endless light. The light of the Mizar star from all the worlds in the universe gathered here. All the expectations, beliefs, prayers, all the external attachments were also buried here. One, I had endless light, and the other I had endless darkness. In the intersection of light and darkness, the Great Wolf flowed quietly. It was untouchable and unfathomable. This scene flashed and disappeared. Then, in the distant starry sky, in the star field enveloped by the Mizar star, a spot of light was born. It was like a candle in the wind, as if it could be extinguished by a breath. However, there was a tenacious will hidden in it, and an immortal light illuminated it. It was born extraordinary. When it gradually stabilized, the spot of light began to expand and began to emit its own light in the vast and endless star field. This light was this Tao. This Tao was sincerity. Along the way, he had no wealth, no power, and was always proud and stubborn. Why was he always able to meet some friends who wholeheartedly befriended him? There was no other reason. Only sincerity. Small things like buying a dog from an ordinary villager in an unknown village. Big things like participating in an old case that involved a wide range of people in an overlord's country. Regardless of wealth, status, or disputes of interest, he treated people and matters with sincerity. In Linzi, he entered the Qi palace alone to give Lin Yuxi an explanation, to give Yang Jing an explanation, and to everyone who placed their hopes on him. This was the biggest explanation he could give. This was sincerity in treating people. When the Tao he pursued was contrary to high positions and generous salaries, when the heart he proved was in a dangerous situation, he only asked his own heart. Risking the risk of disobeying Emperor Qi, he gave up the position of the Northern Yamen Commandant, gave up the power that was at his fingertips, and rose step by step. This was sincerity in himself. Therefore, in the battle between the Trident and the Baifeng, he turned around and embraced fire. Therefore, in the battle between Yu Baidu and the Diviner, his sword collided with a human demon. It had nothing to do with interests, nothing to do with anything else. He was only sincere in his own heart. He treated those people he recognized. He didn't have much, but he was willing to give anything. Therefore, there were also many people who were willing to give him the same sincerity. From the western region to the eastern region, from the Qi state to the Chu state, he wanted to exchange sincerity for sincerity. Sincerity was true and honest. This was also the path he took. Therefore, in the depths of the universe, starlight fell like rain. Countless starlight gathered and began to build the second star tower that belonged to Jiangwang. At this moment, a ray of starlight suddenly appeared in the sky of the mountain and sea realm, which had never had a star. Its light was bright and illuminated thousands of miles. In the entire mountain and sea realm, countless powerful existences raised their heads in surprise. They were either smart and cunning or ignorant and chaotic, but at this moment, they all faintly sensed that the opening of the mountain and sea realm this time seemed to be different from before. Who? Above the endless sea, Wu Ling, who was flying rapidly, suddenly stopped and was bewildered. Who was establishing the star tower in the mountain and sea realm? Gutu's eyes lit up. That's a good idea. Accumulate enough power and establish the star tower after entering the mountain and sea realm. Borrowing the moment the starlight tower is established, it will point out the direction in the mountain and sea realm. Tell me, how much can I sell this idea for? Let's not talk about how this is someone else's idea. Wu Ling's eyes narrowed. In the mountain and sea realm, where the stars are isolated and the directions are chaotic, how can it be so easy? You can't even find the star region. His tone was extremely cautious. Who is this person? This kind of summoning power that illuminates the stars is not something an ordinary starlight tower can provide. Who else can it be? Gu Feng curled his lips. Among the 7 groups that entered the mountain and sea realm, only Xiang Bei, Chu Yuji, Xiao Shu, Jiang Wang, Chu Shanhua, and Zhuguangshu need the star tower. The others all have 4 towers. Since you make this matter so difficult, then let's eliminate the 2 wrong answers, Chu Yuji and Xiao Shu. There are 4 people left. He spread his hands. You can choose from these 4 people. Wu Ling's brows furrowed tightly. You clearly gave the problem to me. Why can you still use this kind of I took advantage of you tone? Then I'll help you eliminate some more. Gufeng looked at the starlight in the sky. This star tower is not in the 4 spirit star region. The nature of the starlight is different. You eliminated my ass. Wu Ling spat. Among these people, which one of them can't get a special star tower method? After thinking for a while, he said, Can you tell which star field we are in? We can use it to find a place for us. There are billions of stars in the sky. How can I tell which is which? Gufeng said angrily. It's already amazing that you can tell it is not in the four-spirit star region. Wu Ling lowered his head to look at the mountain and river sandbox. I keep feeling that something is not right. We have to speed up, Gufeng also said. At this time, the mountain and sea realm had not changed much, but already made people feel uneasy. The Garuda flapped its wings in the sky. Zhuo Guangshu, Chu Shunhua, and Yu Tianyu stood on the broad back of the Garuda. They did not miss the dazzling starlight. What Wu Ling and Gufeng could analyze, the three of them could too. Also, Zhuo Guangshu and Chu Shunhua were together. The area they could determine was even smaller. I did not expect North Xiang to have this hidden move. Chu Shunhua's tone was a little cautious. I originally thought that with his personality, if the inner palace had reached the position he approved of, he would not stay. Who did not come prepared? Yu Qianyu said calmly. She looked up. I think Xiao Shu and Chu Yuji, who set up this star tower, may not be impossible. Zhuo Guangshu originally wanted to say something, but seeing them discussing like this, he thought for a while and remained silent. That possibility was indeed very small. A man wearing a red martial robe with golden edges carried the strangely shaped Tian Shao blade and walked in the sky. He of course saw the starlight in the sky, but he just glanced at it and then passed it. Set up a star tower in the mountain and sea realm, which meant that before entering, the fourth floor was not complete. What was there to worry about? There was no need to mention how difficult it was to set up a star tower here. There was no need to mention how rare this starlight sacred tower was. It was okay if he did not meet it. If he did, it would be a matter of one blade. But where did this Zhu Yin go? After so many days of trekking and countless battles, he had clearly found the location recorded in the records of strange beasts of the mountains and seas. However, this Xiaosizi mountain was completely empty. How strange! Chapter 1447. The starlight of the Mizar Star Tower only shone for a short period of time in the sky of the mountain sea realm. However, in the depths of the universe, this simple pentagonal tower had already stood tall and had become a source of light in the Mizar star domain. Although it was only a rough outline for the time being, it was impossible to carve out more details. However, from now on, as long as Zhang Wang did not die, it would not be extinguished. The moment the second star tower was erected, his body felt the universe. Starlight fell from the distance, and his body was strengthened once more. This time, the strengthening of his body was naturally not as strong as that of the Aliyah Star Tower. The scale of his star power was like heaven and earth. However, the process of personally erecting the tower also deepened his understanding of the path of Tao. For Jiang Wang, the significance of a Mizar Star Tower was that he was no longer alone in the universe. The Aliyah Star Tower and the Mizar Star Tower reflected each other, illuminating the path ahead. In the future, when his soul manifested in the Star Tower, he would be able to grasp his position and not get lost. The teachings of the predecessors allowed the people of the world to follow the path of Tao. The two words Jiang Wang had chosen were also compatible with the Tao of the predecessors. For example, the word faith was chosen by the Confucian school of thought in the Azure Dragon Sacred Tower. The word sincerity was chosen by the Taoist school of thought in the Vermilion Bird Sacred Tower. In other words, words were originally created to describe the Tao. Each word represented a type of understanding of the Tao. The two words faith and sincerity were the embodiment of the Tao in themselves. A person's words were faith, and a person's words were sincerity. For Jiang Wang, these two words were where his path of Tao was, but not his path of Tao itself. It was more like two bright lamps in the long night, illuminating the path ahead. What he had chosen was faith in others and sincerity in his heart. It was not necessarily the same as the predecessors. Every time he erected the Star Tower, it was from the inside to the outside. How could it not be a baptism from the outside to the inside? The starlight on the horizon had already disappeared. Jiang Wang was still immersed in the afterglow. He was in a trance, unaware of the passage of time. Boom, boom, boom. 3 thunderous booms suddenly sounded in the sky. There seemed to be some kind of unforeseen event happening between heaven and earth. Clouds and smoke billowed in the distant sky, and the blue sea beneath his feet flowed and surged. Jiang Wang, who was standing in front of the cliff, saw with his own eyes that the huge floating mountain in front of him actually shook, like a giant beast turning over. Rocks rolled down the mountain, and the soil rustled. Jiang Wang almost thought that it was going to collapse in front of him, but it quickly stabilized itself. That faint throbbing sensation that had come out of nowhere had already disappeared. The sky and sea had returned to normal, as if nothing had happened at all. Just now, what happened? With Jiang Wang's understanding of the mountain sea realm, he obviously couldn't find the answer. However, the 3 claps of thunder had woken him up. Now that the Bai Fong was dead, this enormous floating mountain no longer had a master. Could there be some treasures on the floating mountain that the Bai Fong was guarding? In the blink of an eye, Jiang Wang had already leaped into the air. He stepped on the green clouds, and before long, he had already flown to the peak of the hovering mountain. This mountain was majestic. If one was in a mountain, they wouldn't be able to see anything. Only at this moment, standing at the peak of the mountain and looking as far as the eye could see, did they see dangerous peaks and hidden deep valleys. Previously, all his attention was on the Bai Fong, so he didn't notice the uniqueness of this floating mountain. Such a huge floating mountain, but there wasn't a single blade of grass or tree on it. However, it couldn't be said to be a bare mountain. One could see that the strange rocks were steep, and each had its own wonders. There were stone pillars that stood like trees, and there were large stones that looked like Buddhas sitting on them. There were even clear streams, white stones, and hot springs. As far as the eye could see, beautiful white jade and green gemstones could be seen everywhere, decorating this floating mountain with a different kind of beauty. Jiang Wang couldn't help but reveal a smile on his face. Look, white jade covered the ground, and gemstones were everywhere. How could there be any lack of good things on this floating mountain? The Bai Fong was gone, and there was no one around. The treasures on this mountain should be enjoyed alone. He had chosen to fly high and head to the peak of the mountain because he wanted to see the treasures here. However, he could see everything around the peak at a glance, and indeed, he didn't see anything too special. Although the white jade and gemstones were beautiful, Lord Jiang didn't need to be too interested in them. His footsteps became lighter as he walked in the air. He even activated his Qianyang's scarlet eyes again to increase his eyesight a little so that he wouldn't miss any treasures. He went straight down from the peak of the mountain, and his aura was really like a ferocious tiger descending the mountain. As a newly evolved mystical ability fusion technique, the effects of the Qianyang's scarlet eyes were a small enhancement of eyesight, a small increase of insight, and a stable and rapid release of the true Samadhi fire. Of course, it also retained the divine spirit attack ability of the Qianyang's scarlet eyes. Once the Qianyang's scarlet eyes opened, it wasn't a lie to say that he could see everything. Jiang Wang moved quickly and looked around, not stopping at all. His clothes fluttered as he passed through the stone forest. Suddenly, he heard a crisp sound. Clang! A mutated beast leaped out of nowhere and stood on the peak of the stone pillar right in front of him. The beast's body was like a leopard, and its entire body was red. It had a single horn on its head and 5 tails swaying behind it. Its claws rested on the stone pillar as it lowered its body and stared at Jiang Wang, letting out a threatening growl. The sound was crisp and cold, like a stone being struck. Jiang Wang only felt a chill go straight to the top of his head. The confidence that he had just built the second star tower and obtained the Qianyang's scarlet eyes disappeared without a trace. Without saying anything, he turned around and fled. There was actually another mutated beast on this floating mountain. Now, he had a deep enough understanding of it. He couldn't afford to offend any of the mutated beasts in the mountain sea realm. Those that traveled alone had the strength of a mortal ascension. If they gathered in groups, they were even more overboard. Those leaders were often more vicious and cunning. The Trident was a typical example. Jiang Wang didn't even try to communicate with it, let alone test its strength. He ran away. It wasn't easy to obtain the Bai Fong's and Hua Dou's blood essences. It wouldn't be worth it if he was killed just like that. Without the 9J disc, he couldn't bring out the things he obtained in the Mountain Sea realm. He understood this very well. He just didn't know if the fire lotuses he ate on Volcano Island would be weakened by the rules of the Mountain Sea realm if he left like that. However, although he was curious, Jiang Wang wasn't willing to test himself. How could he spit it out when it was already in his stomach? Clang! The sound was in his ears, and the beast's aura seemed to be close to his back. Jiang Wang immediately fell forward, only to feel a gust of wind sweeping past from above. Scarlet eyes hurriedly looked up. A wisp of true samadhi fire rose and spread out in the air, forming a slender fire net. It bared its fangs and brandished its claws, covering the beast. Before his body touched the ground, he leaped up, circled around the stone pillar, and walked in another direction. He didn't go to places with a wide field of vision. He fully utilized the instant clear sky immortal technique and only ran around the stone forest. He ran extremely fast and skillfully. After all, it wasn't the first time he was chased by a mutated beast. He had some experience. He knew how to escape and how to turn around. The five-tailed beast pounced and crushed the fire net. Of course, this level of true samadhi fire was not harmful to it. However, when its fur touched the fire, its eyes suddenly turned red. It had been sleeping in the cave for some reason, accumulating strength, and was awakened by the call of a certain existence. When it woke up, it found that there were humans drilling into the mountain, so it came to kill them. But this was the fire of its old friend. Bai Fong had always been fierce and stubborn, but what was its relationship with this two-legged beast? How could it allow it to run on the mountain? It seemed that many things had happened in the Mountain Sea realm while it was sleeping. He didn't know if they were prepared, with its five tails swaying about. Although it thought a lot, it actually only paused in the air for a moment. It could have chased after him or not. However, in this short moment, that person had already disappeared without a trace, like a green bird passing through the forest. It blinked its eyes and walked back in surprise. Although this two-legged thief's strength was average, it ran really fast. Chapter 1448. Jiang Wang didn't care about the evil beast behind him. He only focused on fleeing. He didn't know how long he had been running, passing through one stone forest after another. He ran until he was dizzy and didn't know where he was. Suddenly, he couldn't hear any movement. He couldn't hear anything even in his immortal form. He took the opportunity to turn around and look back, but the strange leopard was nowhere to be seen. He probably got rid of it. Jiang Wang stopped and couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief. Speaking of which, after entering the Mountain Sea realm, it seemed that other than running, he only had a few peaceful days on the volcanic island. It really made him miss Sancha. This ugly five-tailed leopard didn't appear when Hua Dou's army invaded the mountain. Now that Bai Fong was dead and Sancha left with his army, this fellow jumped out and acted fierce. It was really a sinister and cunning leopard that bullied the weak and feared the strong. No, Jiang Wang thought carefully. When Sancha and Bai Fong were fighting, Hua Dou's army didn't seem to occupy the entire hovering mountain. There seemed to be an invisible boundary. When Hua Dou's army gathered, they only occupied the half of the hovering mountain where Bai Fong was. Then, was there a possibility? This five-tailed red leopard and Bai Fong were divided into two areas. They each had their own territory and didn't interfere with each other. Otherwise, it couldn't explain why this five-tailed red leopard didn't appear at all when Sancha fought Bai Fong. It also couldn't explain why Hua Dou's army didn't go to that half of the hovering mountain. In fact, when he released the true samadhi fire just now, he seemed to have lost that sense of urgency. Could it be that the five-tailed red leopard thought that he was Bai Fong's subordinate and let him go? The more Jiang Wang thought about it, the more he felt that it made sense. Not all the strange beasts in the Mountain Sea realm were as smart as Sancha. Wasn't the lawn fish he met the first time stupid? There was also the two-headed ape he met in the spatial crack. It tilted its head and looked very stupid. Jiang Wang thought about it again and again. In the end, he couldn't bear to give up the possible gains on this hovering mountain. He didn't directly fly away from this mountain. If he left here, he didn't have the ability to kill another Mountain Sea Realm strange beast and loot another empty mountain. Silently recalling the area where Huodo's army was active on the mountain, they moved carefully within this area, never taking a single step out of it. Thinking about it, the red leopard and the bai fong should each have their own treasures. He did not dare to covet the five-tailed red leopard's treasure, but he should not miss out on the bai fong's. This hovering mountain was extremely vast. Although Jiang Wang only explored the half occupied by the bai fong, it still took him a very long time to search. As they scurried around the huge, hovering mountain, their eyes were almost blinded. Finally, halfway up the mountain, they found a special mountain wall. This mountain wall seemed to be carved out of beautiful snow-white jade, and it didn't look natural. It was over 9 zhang long and 5 zhang high. If a person stood in front of the mountain wall, his shadow would be reflected. The value of such a pure, flawless, huge, and complete piece of jade was immeasurable. However, as a transcendent cultivator, Lord Jiang would not be tempted by gold and jade objects. Within the 5 residence sea, Cloud Child, who was in the ruins of the Cloud Top Immortal Palace, suddenly jumped out and shouted excitedly, "Immortal Master, it's the Cloud Sinking Bone. It's the Cloud Sinking Bone." Jiang Wang had always maintained a wait-and-see attitude towards this chubby boy's memory. Hearing this, he only raised his eyebrows and said, "Isn't this a piece of jade?" "No." Cloud Child appeared very excited. "This is the jade bone of a powerful god after his death, and it's not an ordinary jade. If you look carefully at the white jades on the roadside, you will know that they are completely different." Jiang Wang looked carefully and said, "A perfect white jade and a flawed white jade." "Oh no." Cloud Child was anxious to convince him, but he could not. He stomped his feet twice and suddenly thought of something. He hurriedly said, "The Sutra of Immortals states that when a mountain god dies, the aura of death evaporates into clouds. When it is turbid and heavy, it turns into bone. Look carefully, isn't there a jade pattern in the middle that forms the shape of a mountain?" Jiang Wang looked carefully, and it was indeed so. However, this was not what he was curious about. "The Sutra of Immortals?" he asked. "Eh." Cloud Child was also stunned. He murmured, "I was anxious just now, and this passage suddenly appeared in my mind. I don't know what the Sutra of Immortals is either." This chubby boy did have some fragmented memories, which were traces of his reincarnation as a child of the Immortal Palace. Jiang Wang was used to it, but looking at the jade pattern, he couldn't help but say, "I thought it was a claw mark left by a bai fong. Look at this messy mess. It's a bit like a mountain, but it's also like a cow. It's obviously formed by the pattern, not scratched." Cloud Child stomped his feet and shouted, "That's a mountain. It doesn't look like a cow." Jiang Wang's soul appeared and landed beside him. He glanced at him and said, "Why are you so excited?" Cloud Child opened his eyes wide and said, "This is the cloud bone, the cloud bone." "What's wrong with the cloud bone?" Cloud Child looked at him silently for a while and finally realized that the Master Immortal had forgotten about it. He said tiredly, "It's one of the main materials of the Immortal Palace strongman." This arrogant master was so anxious that he wanted to beat him up. Things were still the same, but people had changed. This broken Immortal Palace was getting worse day by day, and the Master Immortal was getting worse by generation. Oh, Master Immortal Jiang thought of this and finally felt a little embarrassed. "It's not that I don't care about it, but it's that. You know my current strength, and I don't really need a normal puppet." Child of the Cloud looked at him with a strange expression. That look was probably asking, "What is your strength?" But he was afraid of being beaten up, so he said weakly, "Normal Immortal Palace strongmen have the strength of the peak of the outer tower, and they are immortal." Clang. Sauvignon Blanc was already out of its sheath. Jiang Wang held up the world-famous sword and went forward to dig. He vividly demonstrated to Cloud Child what the execution of the Master Immortal was. When the sword touched the wall, a snowy light suddenly flowed. It gently but firmly stopped the sword from moving forward. Jiang Wang looked up in astonishment. 2 lines of words appeared on the huge jade wall created by the cloud bone. They were written in Taoist script, and the strokes were extremely elegant. The words read, Zhangge Mountain, Jade of Quality. Stay here forever, divine name bestowed by the heavens. Jiang Wang's sword-wielding hand paused as he felt an indescribable pressure. The words seemed to have the aura of a divine hilt. It was similar to the feeling from the Forest Sea Elder Dragon. But they were not exactly the same. Was it because the laws of the Mountain Sea realm were different from the Forest Sea Origin world? Or was it because of some other reason? Jiang Wang could not be sure. The meaning of these 2 lines of words was easy to understand. It was nothing more than saying that this floating mountain was called Zhangge and was made of fine jade and precious stones. If one was willing to stay here forever, they would be bestowed a divine name by the heavens. Divine positions and divine hilts naturally existed. Presumably, the Bai Fong and the 5-tailed red leopard were the gods of Zhangge Mountain that had been officially conferred. But who was the heavens bestowed by the heavens? Did it mean that in this mountain sea realm, there was a will that was above all existences? What was that will? Was it the laws of the mountain sea realm itself? Or was it Huang Weijin, who had already died 900 years ago? Jiang Wang was puzzled, but his hands did not stop moving. He pushed the long sword with all his strength, tangling with the snow-colored brilliance as he tried to dig out the cloud's sinking bone. Bai Yuntong, who was hiding in the immortal palace on top of the cloud, was dumbfounded. Although the cultivation level of this immortal master was not high, his courage was indeed outstanding and admirable. He had already dug out such a mysterious reaction, so why did he still dig? On the mountain wall, the 2 lines of Tao characters gradually faded away, returning to its original state. The entire mountain wall was also split into 2, with a name on the left and right, also written in Tao characters. On the left was Zheng, and on the right was Bai Fong. Jiang Wang then understood. That 5-tailed red beast with the body of a leopard was originally called Zheng. Speaking of which, the 2 mountain gods of Zhangge Mountain were the typical name by name, calling out their own names. As Jiang Wang sighed, he continued to push with all his strength. The 2 names on the mountain wall also quietly hung there, as if they were waiting for something. Unfortunately, Jiang Wang did not care at all, throwing flirtatious glances at the blind man. Under the temptation of the immortal palace warriors who were at the peak of the outer tower, Jiang Wang almost used an entire set of human Tao sword forms in front of the mountain wall, but it was useless against the mountain wall, unable to break through the snow-colored brilliance. He could only take a step back, open the Qinyang's scarlet pupil, and seriously size up the mountain wall in front of him. Looking at the 2 words Bai Fong, his heart suddenly moved. He took out the Bai Fong's essence blood, held it in his fist, and then flew up, using the surface of his fist to imprint on the 2 words Bai Fong. Boom! For some reason, everything in front of him did not change. Jiang Wang's heart suddenly felt enlightened. It was like the sun after the rain, and also like the blue sky after the fog cleared. A voice sounded in his mind. It was hard to tell the age of this voice, but it had the spirit of a youth, the calmness of a middle-aged man, and the wisdom of an old man. It recited, "Gods have their gods, ghosts have their ghosts. To comprehend, it is difficult to seek clarity. To live in the mountains and seas, to die like sand. 9 chapters appear together. Pass on this seal technique." This was Huang Weijin's voice. Jiang Wang was sure that this voice came from the surface of his fist. However, he could not intercept it, let alone resist it. Along with this voice, a mysterious and unfathomable seal technique appeared. It covered the sky and filled Jiang Wang's mind. Even with Jiang Wang's current spiritual energy, it still took him a few breaths to recover from the shock. It was called the Bai Fong seal. Based on his understanding of sound, he could determine that the voice that appeared in his mind. It was similar to the voice stored in the shadow recording stone, not a real-time conversation. This made him less nervous. With Huang Weijin's strength, it was normal for her to leave a voice in the mountain sea realm. especially in an environment like the Mountain Sea realm. A mere 900 years was not enough to erase the traces. To be honest, Jiang Wang did not understand the meaning of these words. Perhaps because of the lack of key information, he did not understand what the person who left behind this voice wanted to express. He deduced that the owner of the voice was Huang Weijin, but he was not completely sure. However, the meaning of the last sentence was very clear. 9 chapters appear together. Pass on this seal technique. 9 chapters appear together? This time, there were a total of 9 groups of people entering the Mountain Sea realm. Had they gathered all 9 chapters of the Jade Disc? This was a very important piece of information. Shi Song, wading the river, morning ing, drawing thoughts, Huaisha, thinking of beauties, cherishing the past, ode to orange, sorrow returning wind. When he was in the Mountain Sea purgatory, Guangxu had always had a guess. That was one day, when these 9 jade discs were gathered, what would happen in the Mountain Sea realm? He thought that he might be able to confirm the secret of Huang Weijin's death. And in front of him, there was the first answer, pass on this seal technique. After carefully studying the Bai Fong seal in his mind, Jiang Wang was very sure that the voice was Huang Weijin's. What he had obtained now was one of Huang Weijin's secret treasures. Such a seal technique, if it wasn't Huang Weijin, who could pass it on? He didn't know what the others had obtained in the Mountain Sea realm, but at least this seal technique had been memorized in his mind. It had become a real harvest. Speaking of which, among all the secret techniques and battle skills he had cultivated, he had never come into contact with a seal technique. There was a technique called the God Seal technique, but it was a secret technique related to the soul, not a seal technique. This was a completely new field. This kind of battle skill was mostly found in Buddhism. In the Qi treasury, there were many seal techniques of the withered courtyard. With Jiang Wang's current status, it wasn't that he didn't have the opportunity to come into contact with them, but he had skipped over them at that time. Now, the Baifeng seal that Huang Weijin passed on was extremely mysterious, and its power was unpredictable. It was really a first-class battle skill. Even the current Jiang Wang couldn't grasp it in a short period of time. The harder it was to grasp, the more powerful it was. A great harvest. Jiang Wang satisfactorily took back the Baifeng blood essence, and suddenly his mind moved. Holding the Baifeng blood essence, he could obtain the Baifeng seal. What about the Huado blood essence? Should there also be a Huado seal technique? He held the Huado blood essence and tentatively probed the mountain wall. The reason why he tried this on Zhangji Mountain was mainly because he felt that the words that Huang Weijin passed into his mind didn't seem to be limited to a certain floating mountain or a certain sea. He wouldn't lose out by trying. If it really didn't work, he would think of a way to return to the volcanic island. It was just that the Mountain Sea realm was too big, and he didn't know where to find it. After all, when he went there, he was unconscious, and when he left through a space crack. I really want Sancha. If Sancha was here, then Zheng could also give it a try. Zheng's seal technique sounded very powerful. While his thoughts were running wild, he held the Huado blood essence and pressed it against the mountain wall again. It was almost the same feeling as before, and a vast amount of information instantly flowed into his mind. With the previous experience, it was much easier to absorb this time. His expectations were not wrong. Indeed, through the mountain god wall of Zhangji Mountain, he obtained the Huado seal technique. Jiang Wang also obtained a piece of information from this. When Sancha gave the Huado blood essence, why did it neglect this point? With Sancha's intelligence, it shouldn't have made such a big mistake. The only explanation was that Sancha didn't know. It didn't know that the Huado blood essence it gave could inherit the Huado seal technique. This was very interesting. From this, a very important question could be asked. That was, in the long years that Huang Weijin lived in the Mountain Sea realm, what kind of role did she play? P.S. Immortal Square Sutra. Why is this so? Chapter 1449. The Calamity Seal flowed in his heart. While Jiang Wang moved the calamity blood away, a red flame appeared on his left fingertip as he drew a square on the mountain wall. He had already clashed with the light that covered the mountain wall several times. Although he wasn't able to break through it, he was familiar with it. As for the Bai Fong seal and the Calamity Fighting seal, it was like opening the door to a thief. This allowed him to gain a deeper understanding of the mountain god wall formed by the cloud sinking bone. Since he understood the samadhi, he decided to split it up. The samadhi true fire on his fingertip was like snow melting in the morning sun, melting into the snow-colored light. He cut out a 2-foot-long and 2-foot-wide cloud sinking bone, leaving a giant hole in the mountain god wall. Zhang. As expected, the mountain god wall of Zhang Mountain wasn't so easy to touch. Pretty much at the same time as the samadhi true fire and the cloud sinking bone came into contact, the roar of the five-tailed leopard closed in. The other mountain god of Zhang Mountain was rushing over with terrifying speed. Jiang Wang was already prepared. He flipped his hand and kept the melted cloud condensing bone into his storage box. Qian Yang's red pupil swept across and left dozens of sparks on the mountain god wall, giving the Hui a chance to extinguish the flames and protect the mountain god wall. As for himself, he turned and ran, rushing into the stone forest without looking back. The red makeup mirror split out an image and flew in another direction. Within a radius of 50 miles, the mirror image could be commanded freely. Although it didn't have any actual combat strength, it still gave off a strong aura. At the same time, he raised his hand and released hundreds of flame sparrows. He let them fly around the mountain in a mess and create a commotion. The only thing he wiped away was the sound he made while flying. This time, he didn't stop, running along the path and leaving Zhangji Mountain. A green shirt landed on a floating mountain. He was like a feather flying across the ocean, leaving the giant shadow of Zhangji Mountain. Jiang Wang fell freely like a bird without wings. The wind blew, but it couldn't mess up his thoughts. He just wanted to give it a try. He didn't expect that he would be able to pass through the mountain god wall and receive the Calamity Seal legacy. Was it because the trident that killed the Bai Fong covered the god power? Or was it because the mountain god wall was not limited to Zhangji Mountain, and it only appeared because Bai Fong died in battle? After all, he had said, "Stay in this house forever," the name of a god bestowed by heaven. It was as if there was a vacant seat waiting for someone, and it was summoning a god. Perhaps every floating mountain, island, or sea region had such a divine wall. Once the corresponding conditions were met, it would appear and give Huang Weijin her inheritance. Amongst all the methods of activating it, there was no doubt that killing the guardian beast was the most direct and most difficult method. When Jiang Wang thought of this, he couldn't help but think, why did Huang Weijin leave behind the key to enter the mountain and sea realm before she passed away? If it was just to test the latecomers and pass down what they had learned, then such a thing was simply too shocking. The tradition of opening the mountain and sea realm had continued for 900 years in the Chu territory. It was not his turn to consider this problem. But after 900 years, was there really no one who could find the answer? Now that Jiang Wang was involved, he had to make more considerations. You scare me to death. After flying far away from Mount Zhuang, Baiyun Child sat on the ground of the ruins of the Celestial Palace. He patted his chest and felt a lingering fear. This little fatty had always been timid, so Jiang Wang didn't blame him. He only said to him, "You have to watch closely. If you find any materials, tell me immediately." If there was a chance, Jiang Wang still wanted to gather the materials for the Celestial Palace's strongman in the mountain and sea realm. After all, the cloud-sinking bone could only be formed after a god died. As for the quicksand wood, it was hard to say how complicated it would be. Outside of the mountain and sea realm, where could he find it? Moreover, the core of the Celestial Palace's strongman, the blood of balance, had long been collected by him. It was just that Baiyun Child hadn't thought of a way to repair the ethereal palace, so he couldn't extract it from the ethereal palace. But this time in the mountain and sea realm, he understood the true meaning of samadhi. With such a remarkable ability, it was only a matter of time before he could extract the blood of balance. Therefore, the Celestial Palace's strongman, who originally had no progress, suddenly saw the light of success. Of course, he wasn't willing to let it go. In this era, the Celestial Palace's strongman, which was inherited from the cloud-top Celestial Palace, could completely become his unique reliance. In the world of cultivation, this kind of uniqueness was a kind of value in itself. Bai Yunqiao was proud of himself and said lazily, "Okay." At this time, Jiang Wang didn't care about beating him. He rolled up his sleeves and turned north according to the direction he remembered. The moment he set up the Mizar Star Tower, he had at least temporarily grasped the direction. Guangxu wanted to go to the North Pole, Sky Pillar Mountain, so this direction was definitely correct. Whether it was because he needed the 9 chapters Jade Disc to ensure his harvest, or because he originally planned to enter the mountain and sea realm, he would make this choice. He just didn't know if Zhuo Guangxu and the others had completed the set goal after so many days, and if they were still in the mountain and sea realm. He also didn't know who the remaining 2 groups were when the 9 chapters were gathered. Unfamiliar people always made people feel uneasy. Strong wind, heavy rain, and rolling thunder. The sky was dark. The weather in the mountain and sea realm changed at will. In the waterfall-like rainstorm, Fong Helling wiped his face and looked forward with a touch of unconcealable awe in his eyes. Not far in front of him was Wang Zhangji, who was leisurely strolling in the wind and rain. His long hair hung over his shoulders, and his big sleeves fluttered. He didn't see any movement, nor did he see any special light or shadow. It was just that when the storm was about to hit him, it gently moved aside. This man, earlier, when he easily took him to avoid the God-descending experts of the lifeless sect, he was really frightened and deeply understood the gap between mortals and geniuses. But not long ago, when he fought with the Kuei cow, it completely subverted his understanding of the level of the outer tower. In the outer tower, there was actually so much room for imagination. He couldn't be as calm as Wang Zhangji, and he didn't want to waste his precious Tao energy on this. It was already very difficult to resist the complicated environment of the Chongxian in the mountain and sea realm, so he simply let the wind and rain wet his clothes. Speaking of which, I haven't asked, how did you get this jade annulus? He heard the voice in front of him ask. He walked behind this person and didn't have time to think thoroughly, so he simply said what came to his mind. There are always some people in this world who think they are extraordinary. They think they are righteous and that they can destroy thousands of troops. They are conceited geniuses and think that there is nothing in the world that cannot be peaceful. There are always 7 people who are unconvinced and 8 who are indignant. They speak 4 words of reason, 3 words of responsibility, 2 words of fairness, and 1 word of innocence. Where there is injustice, that is where there is. Where there is unbearable, that is where there is. The person who left this jade disc is such a person. It is said that he is a noble from a small country. He is not young, but he is still very energetic. He was living a good life, but for a family extermination case that had nothing to do with him, he followed the traces of his identity for a full 4 months. In the end, he was successfully exposed. With a somewhat strange expression on his face, he continued, "The so-called story of a hero who successfully cut through the long night is after all a story in a novel. More stories end silently, and more people quietly fall silent. What I saw was the rich and varied faces of people gathered into a collection of swallows. Swallows don't care about any resources, so they used this jade disc in exchange for me to do a few things." He paused at this point. He was also a little surprised that he had said so much. He saw that person's identity being exposed. The face that was distorted in pain, innocence, and stubbornness was slowly peeled off in the hands of the swallows. That person's painful howls were no different from others. What was the difference? Wang Zhangji didn't ask Fong Helling what the swallows asked him to do in exchange for the jade disc. Although as long as he asked, there would definitely be an answer. No matter how much Fong Helling didn't want to say. "What do you think of this person?" He just asked, under the effect of the Chongxian force, which was 100 times stronger than the present world. The raindrops hitting the body were very painful. Fong Helling only treated this degree of pain as scratching an itch. Facing a person like Wang Zhangji, he didn't hide anything and said, "It is fine to say that it is seeking fame," or "It is fine to say that it is defending the Tao." Drawing a sword in anger is the hatred of an ordinary man, and overestimating one's own strength is a lone warrior. In fact, those who are close to him are pedantic, those who are angry are stubborn, and those who are watching laugh at his foolishness. Wang Zhangji continued walking and asked again, "You have been in the human demon organization for so long. Are there many people like this?" "There are not many people who like to throw away their lives," Fong Helling said with a trace of confusion. "But the strange thing is that there are actually quite a few of them. I heard them say that every few years, there would always be some people who would appear, shouting things like eliminating demons and defending the Tao. They would die in batches. This they naturally referred to the human demons who belong to the Valley of No Return." Wang Zhangji's tone didn't change. He said indifferently, "Actually, if we really talk about it, you are obsessed with Zhang Linchuan, and you are a lone warrior. You can also be considered this kind of person." Fong Helling grinned in the rain, allowing the rainwater to splash into his mouth. When he swallowed it, it was a bit astringent. "I'm only doing it because of hatred, not because of justice," he said very consciously. "That kind of thing, only children would believe. There is no such thing in this world." Wang Zhangji continued to walk forward. He didn't feel anything special. In this world, there were very few things that could make him feel emotional. He didn't feel that Fong Helling was right, nor did he feel that he was wrong. Sometimes there was no reason to speak of in this world. Right or wrong, who could say for sure? One has to be naive. He only murmured this sentence and then lost interest in talking, because he suddenly remembered that there used to be such a person. That one has to be naive. Fong Helling, who was walking behind him, was also silent in the rain. For some reason, a figure suddenly appeared in Fong Helling's mind. He actually really wanted to know, if another 10 years passed, how would that person answer? He thought that the answer would definitely change, but he also felt that if it was that person, perhaps it wouldn't change. Who knew? Rumble. The wind grew stronger. The rain grew heavier. The wind was like a knife, and the rain was like arrows. Outside the spell of light, it was like an army ramming into a city. The battle was extremely fierce, and the sound was like the sound of a pipa. Within the range of the spell of light, the back of the Garuda was warm and peaceful. Chu Shanhua, who was good at playing the pipa, sat cross-legged and listened to the rain. He smiled and asked Zhuo Guangshu if he remembered the Mid-Autumn Festival last year. At that time, they were hiding in the largest lantern in Ying's city, listening to the noise outside and sitting quietly like this. They knew that this world was noisy, but this world didn't know their peace. Zen Master Yu was meditating at the front. Looking at her calm posture, it seemed that she would take out a wooden fish and hit it at any time. This made Zhuo Guangshu unable to laugh freely. After so many days, the three of them acted together. Each of them had their own methods and cooperated well. Of course, they had already gained something. They joined forces to visit Heavenly Mountain. Chu Shanhua had already achieved his goal of coming to the Mountain Sea Realm. This was undoubtedly a good start, and they would continue like this. This kind of wind and rain was not the influence of any strange beast, but the change of weather in the Mountain Sea Realm itself. The Garuda broke through the curtain of rain at an extremely fast speed. The spell of light that enveloped the three people on its back was like a lonely lamp in the rain. Suddenly, the lonely lamp flashed, as if it was about to be extinguished. The Garuda suddenly flapped its wings, and the three people on the Garuda's back stood up together. In the dark wind and rain ahead, a figure wearing a red martial robe with golden edges stepped into their field of vision, getting closer and closer. There was no other movement. However, just the ostentatious aura on his body was about to crush the spell of light. In the entire Mountain Sea Realm, who else could it be other than Do Zhao? The shadow of the Heavenly Maiden had already appeared behind Chu Shanhua. Zhuo Guangshu heard the sound of a tsunami beside him. Zen Master Yu, who was wearing a gray cloak and a cloak, couldn't see her expression, but the Garuda controlled by her had already restrained its flying posture and assumed a battle posture. The three rare geniuses were all ready to attack, and Do Zhao just walked over without hesitation, disregarding everyone's vigilance and vigilance. He casually passed through the curtain of rain and walked up to the Garuda. He said in a matter-of-fact tone, "The Zhuyin has disappeared, completely disappeared. Some kind of change has happened in the mountain sea realm that I don't know about, and my harvest is not guaranteed. Now I need to gather all the jade discs. Once I'm done, you may still have a chance." He calmly extended a hand. "You are all geniuses of Chu. Give me the jade discs, and they will not harm your origin." Those who understood Do Zhao knew that him being willing to explain so much to you was already a form of respect. However, they didn't know who Do Zhao was giving this respect to at this moment. Zhuo Guangshu, Chu Shunhua, or Zen Master Yu. But some people might be flattered by this respect. Some people, with the same pride, would only see this as humiliation. At the very least, you should have brought Do Mian with you. You just walked over alone, and so casually extended your hand. Do Zhao. Chu Shunhua's beautiful eyes were filled with anger, and his voice was as cold as a blade. Should I say you are arrogant or stupid? It was true that in a situation where talent was similar, the difference in cultivation was difficult to overcome. However, they still had Yu Tiannu, whose cultivation was not lower than theirs. It was true that Do Zhao was invincible among his peers, and was publicly acknowledged as the #1 Tianjiao of Chu's younger generation. However, they had three people on their side. Do Zhao dared to be so arrogant. Who was he looking down on? Do Zhao was not angry at Chu Shunhua's attitude. He just looked at Zhuo Guangshu calmly. "Guangshu, because of that person who lit up the Divine Sky Phoenix flag, I am willing to give you one more chance. You are an adult. Now tell me, what do you think?" Zhuo Guangshu looked at him calmly and said, "You can kill me and take it from my corpse, but you can't ask me for it." Chapter 1450. Do Zhao stared at Zhuo Guangshu. He seemed to be surprised at the youth's determination. Zhuo Guanglia's light was too dazzling. Under the sun, the stars were nowhere to be seen. Zhuo Guangshu's talent was overshadowed. In the impression of many Chu people, the departed son seemed to have a younger brother. That was the end of the impression. But today, facing him, Do Zhao, in this storm, Zhuo Guangshu stood so straight, his gaze so determined. He suddenly realized that the youth who grew up under Zhuo Guanglia's wing was starting to face the storm alone. Of course, Zhuo Guangshu was the Zhuo family's matter. No matter how much he cared, there was a limit. He thought of Do Mian. This trip to the mountain sea realm, although he had no intention of asking for help, he had thought of bringing Do Mian along to explore and help his younger brother gain some benefits. But Do Mian refused to come. His determination surprised him. At that time, he did not take it to heart. Now that he saw Zhuo Guanglia's younger brother, he suddenly thought, what was Do Mian thinking when he refused such an opportunity? "Sorry," Do Zhao said softly. He looked at Zen Master Moon. "Then what do you think?" Zen Master Moon was silent for a moment. Then she said, "We can give you a piece of jade." Chu Shunhua was instantly moved. Of the three of them, Yu Tiannu had the clearest vision. She had always trusted Yu Tiannu's judgment. And regarding the result of this battle, Yu Tiannu was undoubtedly pessimistic. How was this possible? How was this possible? How strong was she? How strong was Yu Tiannu? Zhuo Guangshu was also undoubtedly a genius. The three of them were working together against the enemy. How could Yu Tiannu make such a judgment? She could not believe it, but she knew that Yu Tiannu would not make a mistake. Do Zhao glanced at the silent Chu Shunhua. He knew that Yu Tiannu's decision would be approved by her, and Zhuo Guangshu would undoubtedly approve of Chu Shunhua's choice to be able to get a piece of jade from the three of them. In the entire Mountain Sea realm, only Do Zhao could do it. But he still shook his head. "I said I want everything." He gave Chu Shunhua a chance because he knew Chu Shunhua's talent. He gave Zhuo Guangshu a chance because of the man called Zhuo Guanglia. He gave Zen Master Yu a chance because he could vaguely sense how powerful she was. But even so, even though he knew so much, he knew that the three people in front of him were definitely not simple. Not only were they not simple, they could even be said to be rarely seen powerful. He still did not compromise at all. Because he was Do Zhao, he didn't need to consider how strong his opponent was. Scarlet Ape had already disappeared. He was determined to obtain all 9 jade discs. Boom! As soon as Do Zhao finished speaking, the battle had already begun. Those standing on the back of the mechanical Garuda were also the best of the best. No one was willing to hand over the jade annulus. Since they knew that there was no way to settle this peacefully, none of them would sit still and wait for death. Zhuo Guangshu was the first to act, because right now it was raining heavily and the ocean was boundless, and he was the River Earl. Armor covered his body, and his battle robe fluttered in the wind. All the raindrops falling from the sky within a radius of 10 miles suddenly stopped. This was an extremely tense and still scene. From sudden movement to sudden stillness, there was an endless aftertaste of power. 10 miles away, a torrential downpour hit the sea, causing endless ripples. Within 10 miles, the wind was still howling, but the rain had stopped. They were under the River Earl's control in an instant, and they were his vanguard. After a moment of stillness, they suddenly moved again. Countless raindrops were all rushing toward Do Zhao. It was as if a hole had appeared in the sky, and the Milky Way was pouring in. Countless raindrops gathered and poured down with Do Zhao as the terminus, like a huge funnel connecting the sky and the earth. However, those raindrops did not actually merge. Each drop had its own unique falling momentum, and they all had their own sharpness, charging from the sky to the sea. Countless falling forces collided together. Ear-piercing screams merged into one, almost deafening one on the spot. This kind of technique, this kind of control over water elements, it was not an exaggeration to say that Zhuo Guangshu had grasped the most top-notch water element killing force at the inner palace level. The rain fell from the Milky Way, and it killed Do Zhao. It was so grand and imposing. That red martial attire with golden edges seemed to be the only remaining flame under this dark and gloomy sky. Do Zhao, on the other hand, had only pulled out his saber. This was a world-famous saber that embodied bravery and perseverance, called Heaven's Dawn. This was a man who was qualified to be the number 1 person below the divine descent. His name was Do Zhao. With his saber in hand, he only needed to move forward if he wanted to win. He moved forward, ignoring the wind and rain in the sky. Under Zhuo Guangshu's control of millions of falling raindrops, he moved forward resolutely. He did not even raise his head to look at the sky. He only stared at Zhuo Guangshu's eyes. He took a step forward and charged at the 3 of them. Crack, crack, crack. The mechanism Garuda charged forward without hesitation. It opened its beak, and a golden light turned into a spear that shot out, sharp and fierce. Its body pressed behind this golden light, and its wings spread wide, slashing like a saber. Zen Master Yu stretched out her palm, which was suffused with a brass luster, and pressed it forward. The light shield formed by the light incantation enveloped the 3 of them, and was on the verge of collapse. Under this press, countless Sanskrit characters surged out like fish lingering on the surface of the light. This caused the light shield to shine brightly, and for a moment it was as bright as the sun, indestructible and unbreakable. Chu Xuanhua's seal was formed before it. He opened his hands to both sides, and his 10 fingers were like playing a pipa. A wisp of green wind circled between his fingers like a magpie, within a radius of 10 miles. Zhuo Guangshu controlled the rain, and she controlled the wind. The wind was strong for a moment, condensing into sharp green wind blades that surrounded them from all sides, dancing chaotically. The 3 of them and the mechanism Garuda completed their cooperation in an instant. They were both offense and defense, and they were all present in all directions. This area, from the highest sky to the bottom of the blue sea, with 10 miles as the boundary, was completely enveloped in their powerful attacks. It was like a scene of the end of the world. And Do Zhao took another step forward. His dazzling figure moved forward amidst the rain that resembled a gigantic funnel, amidst the endless wind blades that danced and slashed at him, and amidst the gigantic Garuda's spear of golden light and the wing blades. Why not move slowly? Let the wind and rain. Let the wind and rain. His saber moved, but in the blink of an eye, his saber was clearly still in his hand, and his hand was still hanging low. His saber moved? This awareness seemed to turn into a question. The scene without any change made the spectators doubt themselves. But in the next moment, the sky cracked. This was not a word to describe, but a precise description. It was at this moment that a long and narrow crack appeared in the sky. The huge funnel formed by countless raindrops was forcefully separated by this crack. The rain fell into the crack. In front, behind, left, and right, cracks appeared in the space one after another. The wind blades that surrounded them from all sides and danced endlessly. They also collapsed in front of the sudden space crack. Bang! Countless fragments of the mechanism exploded and fell like rain. The mechanism Garuda, which had the combat strength of the outer building level, was actually shattered. The golden light spell that covered everyone also shattered silently. It was the divine punishment of the 7 styles of fighting. 1 slash to see 8 cracks. Such a majestic power did not scare anyone away. In the falling fragments of the mechanism Garuda and the broken shadow of the golden light spell, a tall and holy figure suddenly condensed and leaped into the sky. Breaking the flowing light, the fairy descends. That sacred face, that perfect figure, and that extremely beautiful posture, like a meticulously brushed painting, unfurled naturally. The 7-foot-tall beauty in a magnificent dress brandished her 2 swords and slashed in a cross, as if she wanted to split the world. The sword momentum split the sky and destroyed the enemy. Do Zhao's figure swayed, and he had already left the sword momentum. He took a step forward and fell with his saber. Clang! The thick and sharp Tian Shao saber smashed precisely at the point where the fairy's 2 swords crossed. In terms of body size, the 7-foot-tall Do Zhao was like a toy in front of the fairy. The 4-foot-long Tian Shao saber compared to the fairy's 3-foot-long twin swords was like a straw pressing down on a towering tree. But when the saber fell, the huge twin swords in the fairy's hands were actually cut open. No cut. Do Zhao's eyes were extremely indifferent at this moment. The blade of the Tian Shao saber was smeared with a layer of faint light. It was this layer of faint light that cut open the twin swords condensed by the fairy's supernatural power light. And in the next moment, almost endless saber light exploded from the fairy's body. The entire huge fairy virtual statue actually began to collapse. This scene was too shocking. The dignified, sacred, and powerful fairy collapsed with a bang after a single slash. The statue shattered into mud, and the heavenly body flowed into light. This move was called divinity destruction. Saber/supernatural power. The blade of the Tian Shao saber continued to move forward. The number 1 killing technique in the past 500 years was unscrupulously displaying its killing intent. Rumble. 2 black dragons stretched out their claws and pulled out the extremely luxurious Hebo, divine chariot, from a void. It just happened to catch Chu Shanhua, who had collapsed the fairy statue. Zhuo Guangshu, who was covered in divine armor, held his right elbow with his left hand and pointed his right hand in front of his eyebrows. The sound of waves immediately rose. A monstrous wave rolled out from behind him and crossed the sky. It was like an arch bridge that protected the Hebo divine chariot under the bridge hole. And the huge wave that fell immediately jumped up. The dense waves struggled and surged, faintly forming the shape of a dragon's head, as if it would leap out at any time and roar endlessly. Water element, Tao technique, 1,000 water dragon kill. Above the sky, a green thorny whip that was several feet long suddenly condensed. It was ferocious and terrifying, as if it was being held by an invisible god. Smack! It shattered the air. It aimed at Do Zhao and swung down. Water element, Tao technique, sea lashing whip. Although the raindrops that fell from the sky were split apart by Do Zhao, under Zhuo Guangshu's control, they became resources for the Tao technique and accelerated the formation of the Tao technique. A portion of the raindrops melted into the sea-lashing whip, while the rest of the raindrops rolled in the air and gathered together. It was a huge mass of water suspended high in the air, as if it would explode at any time. But under Zhuo Guangshu's perfect control, it kept shrinking and gathering. Finally, it formed a bright moon, and when the bright moon shone, there were thousands of rays of moonlight. When it saw someone, it would kill. It was the moon arrow. Ji Shaoqing had the divine art crescent moon, and the form of the divine art killing technique was the moon arrow. This water element Tao technique, named Sea Rising Bright Moon, was created by referring to the divine art crescent moon. Although its power was not as strong as the divine art, under the control of Hebo divine art, it was still quite impressive. But this was only the beginning. In Do Zhao's eyes, which were filled with shock and amazement, the water element Tao techniques that covered the sky and earth were reflected. It was as if the nest of the water element Tao techniques had exploded. The dense water element Tao techniques rushed out like hornets. At the moment when Chu Shun and Goddess Hua were destroyed, Zhuo Guangshu displayed his shocking water element talent. With a thought, he consecutively released 18 water element Tao techniques, which complemented each other like a chain of hell. With the water dragon thousand kills, the sea lashing whip, and the sea rising bright moon as the core, and with 15 water element Tao techniques below the A grade as the supplement, he truly completed a magnificent dance of Tao techniques with the cultivation of the inner mansion realm. But Do Zhao's amazement turned into regret. After all, his cultivation was still insufficient, and his experience was still shallow, magnificent but not practical enough, grand but not powerful enough. The Tian Shao saber was raised slightly from the bottom left to the top right and pulled in the air. Rip! It was like the sound of cloth being torn apart. But what was torn apart was the space, the sky that enveloped this place. Around him, the space was torn apart. The water dragon thousand kills, the sea lashing whip, the sea rising bright moon. They were all destroyed and could not get close to him. The saber shattered the Tao techniques that filled the sky. The endless water, elemental energy in this space was all destroyed. Do Zhao walked forward, facing Hebo's divine chariot. In the light of the collapsed Tao techniques, he looked straight into Zhuo Guangshu's eyes. Such a performance can indeed make people look forward to the future, but today, you are still not enough. As he said this, he slashed his saber vertically. Far from enough. A total of 13 space cracks surrounded the entire divine chariot at this moment. With one slash of sky punishment, he was about to punish and kill 2 people and leave the scene. During the gathering of the Yellow River, his slash of sky punishment could only create 1 crack in the sky. But now, he could create 8, 9, and even 13 cracks with 1 slash of his saber. For a person like him, which day did he not advance 1,000 miles? Now, so many days had passed, and he was still in the outer mansion. Naturally, it was not the same as yesterday. Back then, at the Riverview platform, he and Yung Genzuan used all their means, and both sides were injured, and were called peerless. Many people felt that Yung Genzuan had just entered the outer mansion not long ago, and he was already in the 4th mansion. His future should not be as bright as Yung Genzuan's. However, with those people's vision, wisdom, and awareness, how could they understand Do Zhao? Since he was still willing to stay in the outer mansion, it was naturally because there were more possibilities in this realm. Who said that the heaven's sanctum was peerless? Who said that establishing the 4th mansion and grasping the path of Tao was the limit of this realm? How could those mediocre people be qualified to define the word limit? Wherever he went, that was the limit. Wherever his saber slashed, that was the limit. At this moment, the sky was silent. The violent wind and rain within a range of 10 miles also seemed to be silent. Zen Master Moon had already completed her Tao technique, and the light of the supreme Tao technique gathered in the sky after the Tao technique scattered. However, there was still some distance, and it was about to fall. The terrifying cracks in the sky had already covered He Bo's divine chariot. It was as if the people on the chariot would be disintegrated in the next moment. At this moment, on the divine chariot, a hand stretched out from behind Zhuo Guangshu, who was like a god. It was a smooth, beautiful, and flawless hand. It stretched out from behind Zhuo Guangshu and gently swiped in the air. The 13 heavenly fissures smoothed out. Chapter 1451. Dou Zhao's strength was unstoppable. No matter what divine abilities, Dao techniques, or how powerful the puppets were, they were all shattered with a single slash. From the beginning until now, he had not stopped at all. Keep walking forward, keep walking forward. No one stopped him in the truest sense. Only at this moment, he stopped. He stopped in the air and felt a long-lost danger. That sense of danger did not come from the faint light of the supreme-grade Dao technique in the sky. It was right in front of him. It was in the He Bo divine carriage, in the slender hand that stretched out. This hand looked so beautiful and flawless. It was as if Chu Shanhua was hugging Zhuo Guangshu from behind, and then naughtily stretched out her hand from Zhuo Guangshu's waist and stretched it in front of Zhuo Guangshu's eyes. It was as if she was saying, "Look, Lang Jun, isn't the nail polish I put on beautiful?" But it was also such a hand that easily smoothed out the 13 cracks in the sky. It was such a hand that made a powerhouse like Dou Zhao feel a sense of danger. At most, he was 2 steps away from stepping on that luxurious carriage. But he couldn't walk anymore. His saber was still in his hand, but he retreated instead. But he only took half a step back, less than 90 feet away, and he couldn't move anymore. Dou Zhao wasn't the only one who couldn't move anymore. There was clearly the supreme-grade Dao technique that was about to fall from the sky, the wind that blew past his ears, and the light of the Dao technique that was cut into pieces. Even Black Dragon, who was pulling the carriage, and Zhuo Guangshu on the He Bo divine carriage. It was an entire space. Chu Shunhua's trump card was finally revealed. He finally knew what the divine ability she had been hiding was. The supreme divine ability, Sky's Ceiling. Sky's Ceiling is called the universe, and the universe is called the universe. It was a supreme divine ability that controlled space. With a thought, space was still. What was supreme, unparalleled, might not necessarily be the pinnacle of supernatural powers, but those who could bear this title were definitely the pinnacle of supernatural powers. For example, Yu Siqing, the powerhouse of the Sea clan that Jiang Wang had once met, also had a divine ability that ignored distance and crossed space to attack. It was called sky splitting. For example, Qin Jijin of the Qin Kingdom's heavenly mansion also had the divine ability to explore the void and wander through the cracks in space. It was called void refinement. Even the minister of Zhuang country, Du Ruhui, had the ability to come and go without fear. However, all of these abilities had to stop before the heavens. At the same cultivation level, the heaven shroud divine ability had the highest control over space. Therefore, Chu Shanhua was able to discover the 2-headed ape Nianzheng in advance, and Chu Shanhua was able to wipe out the crack in the sky with one hand. Therefore, she stopped everything and walked out from behind Zhuo Guangshu towards Dou Zhao. In the vast and boundless world of cultivation, the stillness of space did not seem to be too frightening. This was because to many cultivators, space itself was not an impenetrable barrier. With the help of various powerful abilities and secret techniques, many cultivators could break through space. But under the control of the heaven sealing divine ability, the frozen space was extremely terrifying. If the strength of space was compared to a door, originally, the door was left ajar, and many people could easily leave with a light push. But now the door was locked. What's more, it was a big iron door with a general lock. Of course, the space where the heavenly closure stopped was also limited by one's cultivation. The strength of the opponent affected the strength and duration of spatial freeze. But even Dou Zhao, an invincible existence in the outer building realm, could not completely get rid of the influence of the heavenly closure and was frozen on the spot. Was it not worth it to expose such a top-notch divine ability that had been hidden for a long time to the Mountain Sea realm? Should it have made a more stunning appearance at a more appropriate time to seize more gains? In order to hide this divine ability, Chu Shunhua even gave up the Yellow River Gathering. Not many people in the entire Chu family knew about it, and it should have been hidden again and again. But Zhuo Guangshu was right next to her. 30% of Zhuo Guangshu's divine soul origin was right in front of her. What else was worth it? Just like when her heavenly maiden was broken, Zhuo Guangshu immediately drove the divine chariot and danced wildly. Chu Xuanhua's love in this life must be more than Zhuo Guangshu's, so she moved forward. At this moment, space was still, so there was no wind. But Chu Xuanhua's dress was fluttering. She stepped off the gorgeous chariot, stepped on the black dragon that was pulling the chariot, and walked forward. She approached Dou Zhao in such a noble and elegant manner. The pale golden dress was opposite the gorgeous red martial suit with golden edges. Chu Shunhua didn't mean to say anything. Why should she say anything? She just walked forward leisurely in the still space. When she got close, she raised her palm and directly poked at Dou Zhao's throat. Her palm was like a knife, extremely sharp. Poof! It was the sound of flesh being cut open. Chu Xuanhua's eyes were shocked because the sound of flesh being cut open didn't come from her. Her palm knife didn't have time to cut open Dou Zhao's throat. What broke the seal of space? Who was moving under the stillness of the sky? She immediately saw the answer with her own eyes, because it was a cut on Dou Zhao's throat. This cut was very shallow and thin, but it couldn't hide from Chu Xuanhua's eyes, and it couldn't hide the blood. As the blood flowed, a wisp of knife energy leaped out, imitating the shape of a knife. It seemed to be held by an invisible hand and cut Chu Xuanhua's palm knife. Chu Xuanhua couldn't help but pause. The second wisp of knife energy followed with extreme precision, landing on the exact same spot and cutting Chu Xuanhua back a step. Small cuts split open all over Dou Zhao's neck, and wisps of knife energy leaped out one after another. This was a peerless knife technique that was throbbing and real with energy. The knife slashed at Chu Shunhua again and again, forcing her to keep retreating. Dou Zhao still didn't move under the stillness of space. The saber aura that broke out of his body, under his exquisite control, continued to attack and attack. Chu Shunhua used her palm as a knife, fighting and retreating. Even Dou Zhao couldn't defeat her with only this level of knife energy. But the sky's shrouding divine power had already restrained too much of her power. She especially had to avoid the fierce battle breaking the stillness of space. Grasping that delicate balance was an elegant art. At this moment, her retreat was actually an advance. The knife energy that broke out of Dou Zhao's body could only have the first force that he activated in his body. It didn't need to be far away, and it would stop in this space. When she retreated to the 7th step, she had enough room to attack again. When she retreated to the 9th step, she could create an opportunity to kill Dou Zhao. When she took the 8th step, she was already prepared. She felt the delicate balance. Just as she was about to change her move, her expression suddenly changed, because Dou Zhao's knife energy that was constantly slashing at her had unknowingly formed a momentum. It was clearly forced to stop in this space, frozen on the long road to repel her. But it echoed with each other and formed a knife energy formation. All the knife energies were combined in one place. It swept across in front of Chu Xinhua's eyes. It didn't hurt her, but it made her heart sink. This knife light was so bright. In the entire space, the stillness created by the sky shrouding divine power shattered. The divine power backfired, and Chu Xinhua froze on the spot. From a beginning to the end, Dou Zhao's goal was to break the stillness of space. And the flaws that Chu Xinhua saw in the battle, the opportunities that she painstakingly created, were all under Dou Zhao's control. Her knife skills were more than 1 or 2 levels inferior to Dou Zhao's. This divine power of yours is really strong and terrifying. No wonder you hit it so well. Do Zhao regained his freedom and commented. The thin knife wound on his neck had stopped bleeding. He held Sky Dawn, which was still shining brightly. But although I haven't descended to God, the inside of my body has been mixed and perfected. The outside of my body is a space, and the inside of my body is another space. With your current strength, being able to affect the space outside of my body is already the limit. If you want to affect the space inside of my body, it's inevitable that you won't be able to do it. Blood flowed from the corner of her mouth. Chu Shunhua instantly understood everything. So Do Zhao attacked from the inside of his body, first breaking the body, then breaking the space. Was this something that could be thought of in an instant of life and death? In particular, Chu Shunhua was sure that this was Do Zhao's first time coming into contact with the sky, shrouding divine power. Attacking from the inside of one's body was not something that could be done with just a few words. Do Zhao's internal and external fusion, perfected and perfected, was already close to the manifestation of the body of God. Only at this level could there be the so-called space inside of one's body. It was also precisely because of such a perfected and flawless body that it was impossible to materialize knife energy from the inside out and cut one's powerful body without paying a price. At the very least, it could not be those few small wounds. Do Zhao's current injuries were definitely not as light as he appeared to be. However, even though she had such a clear judgment in her heart, even though the heaven closure divine power was not useless, Chu Shunhua's heart still grew colder and colder. No wonder even Zen Master Yu was not optimistic about this battle. She had hidden the ultimate divine power for so long, but she still could not determine the outcome of the battle. She really did not know who could fight such a Do Zhao under God's descent. The heaven closure divine power seal on the space was broken, and it did not only mean that Do Zhao was free. Do Zhao's opponent had never been just Chu Shunhua. The transcendent grade Dao technique that had been brewing in the sky for a long time suddenly exploded. Rumble. After being suppressed for so long, this 8 treasures slaying art seemed to have become even more violent. Tens of thousands of golden rays of light tore through the gloomy sky, drawing a circle of light in the stormy sky. The golden light exploded like the sea. As it floated and sank, 8 types of majestic Dharma artifacts appeared. They were the treasure vase, treasure lid, Pisces lotus, right spiral conch, auspicious knot, venerable shungpong, and jade wheel. Each powerful force responded to each other and blasted down together. Zen Master Yu hovered in the air and only chanted, "When I am a Buddha, I will slay all demons." Under the illumination of the golden light, the gray robe and long cloak that she was wearing actually had a kind of sacred feeling. To break such a powerful Tao technique, heavenly punishment was the most useful. The maximum number of 13 splits was 1 slash. No matter how many Dharma artifacts one had, they would not be able to withstand it. However, in front of the possessor of the heaven closure divine power, slashing open a crack in the sky was really a joke. Zen Master Yu had used the 8 treasures slaying art with the intention of exhausting Do Zhao. However, after Chu Shunhua displayed his ultimate divine power, this transcendent grade Tao technique that had been fully unleashed seemed to have the possibility of being even more useful. At this moment, the 8 treasures were gathered together, and their flames connected. They had a divine power that could suppress all demons and monsters. At this moment, a ball of shadow enveloped Do Zhao. His brilliant face seemed to be illusory for a moment. He raised his saber and slashed it toward the sky. It was just 1 slash. Boundless dark smoke rose into the sky. Such smoke made people feel depressed and hopeless when they saw it. In the boundless smoke, all kinds of evil faces appeared. Ferocious faces, painful faces, wailing faces, murderous faces, hopeless faces, hateful faces. The world was a boundless sea of bitterness. It was born sorrowful and hurt. This slash was a man-made blasphemy against Buddha. In all the tragedies of the world, man-made disasters were more intense than natural disasters. If people ate each other, who would worship clay gods and Buddhas? If I am not safe, I will melt my golden body and exchange it for gold and silver. The roaring aura of calamity, with thousands of evil faces, instantly swallowed the 8 treasures of slaying art. After Do Zhao slashed his saber towards the sky, he did not look at the sky again. Since he had slashed out, the outcome was already decided. He naturally took a step forward and approached Chu Shunhua, slashing horizontally with his saber. All of this seemed to take a long time to describe, but in the specific battle, Do Zhao slashed twice consecutively after breaking the frozen space. One slash swallowed the 8 treasures slaying art, and the other slash wanted to kill the most threatening Chu Shunhua. At this moment, Chu Shunhua had just gotten rid of the effects of his divine power being slashed, and the cold blade was already coming towards him. She felt that her body was retreating, while Zhuo Guangshu's body was moving forward. This young man, who was still a little inexperienced, stood in front of her resolutely. He reached out and grabbed the void, directly condensing water essence. Amidst the mighty sound of the tide, he pulled out a sword of flowing waves and blocked the sky dawn blade by a hair's breadth. Using the long river as a sword, he blocked the sky. This sword could be called brilliant. How could the Zhuo family's inheritance be weak? Zhuo Guangshu did not use a weapon, but it did not mean that he did not know how to. At the right time, he would perform appropriately. But brilliance was often relative. A firefly could not compete with the bright moon. He was facing Do Zhao's saber. So this sword was not brilliant enough. Whoosh! The Taoist sword instantly crumbled. Along with it, Zhuo Guangshu's sword-wielding hand also collapsed. His skin instantly dried and cracked. One crack after another started from the back of his hand and quickly spread to his entire arm. His entire body fell backward, slashed into the blue sea by the saber. Do Zhao did not take another look. He only pulled the blade back and slashed at Chu Shunhua again. Since ancient times, beauties had aged easily and flowers had withered easily. This saber destroyed the years and destroyed the youth. Chu Shunhua also did not take another look at Zhuo Guangshu, even though her heart had fallen along with him. However, a woman like her naturally knew what was most important at this very moment. How could she really let Do Zhao kill Zhuo Guangshu in front of her and then take the jade disc from Zhuo Guangshu's corpse? She pressed her hand forward, facing the sky Dawnblade's blade. She forcibly suppressed the turmoil in her body and mobilized all the magical power she could at this moment. Heavens! With her current cultivation, it was not enough to stop the space where Do Zhao was at twice. But at this moment, her limits were shaken. Her skin was already affecting her palm. From the point where the blade touched her palm, the withering power spread to her entire arm. But everything stopped. Chu Shunhua certainly did not want to give Do Zhao another chance to attack and break the frozen space. The huge amount of Tao essence in her body roared, colliding with the powerful attack. But endless starlight suddenly appeared in the distant sky. Although the 4 great sacred towers did not appear, the light of the star towers had already descended. The starlight was extremely dazzling. From the surging tide of starlight, a gorgeous blade of starlight leaped out and slashed down from the sky. All of this seemed to have started at the same time as Chu Shunhua's struggle. The heaven's closure had just been activated when starlight controlled the god-slaying blade and slashed down almost at the same time. Chu Shunhua's heaven's closure was of course powerful, but how far could it affect? Once the god-slaying blade slashed down, it directly shattered the frozen space affected by the heaven's closure from the outside. At this moment, the Tao essence in Chu Shunhua's body had just begun to roar. The Sky Dawn Blade's blade continued to move forward and directly slashed open Chu Shunhua's palm, along with her entire arm. The withering light of the skin quickly spread to her entire body. Do Zhao drew a line with his blade, and a streak of bloody light flew around Chu Shunhua's neck. He directly passed by and faced in Master Yu, who was pouncing over. And behind him, Chu Shunhua fell down dejectedly. beauty withering. Chapter 1452. In this world, there was no invincible divine ability, only invincible people. Shrouding heaven was, of course, an extremely terrifying divine ability. But after Do Zhao came into contact with it once, he had thought of more than one way to break it. Attacking from within his body was, of course, one way. Attacking from outside the range of shrouding heaven was another way. But the former was faster and more suitable for urgent situations. The latter could mobilize more power and was more suitable for when he was prepared. For example, now, Chu Shanhua used all his strength and struggled to use shrouding heaven a second time. But he did not know that his god-slaying blade had been prepared for too long. That was why he and Chu Shanhua attacked at almost the same time. Chu Shanhua forcefully used the divine ability to stop space, but in reality, he had destroyed the possibility of saving himself. Because Zen Master Yu, who was rushing over, was also stopped, but she could not break through the influence of Chu Shanhua's divine ability like Do Zhao, so she was a bit slower. It was this bit of difference that determined life and death. Shanhua, Zen Master Yu's sluggish voice sounded almost at the same time as shrouding heaven was broken. She could not help but be shocked and angry. But when she finished speaking, Chu Shanhua had already fallen. She went forward to save Chu Shanhua. But in the instant that space stopped, the one who welcomed her was Tian Shao. Do Zhao casually grabbed the falling 9-jade annulus and moved forward, attacking Yu Qiannu. The thick and sharp Tian Shao saber flashed with ruthless sharpness. The saber slashed vertically with the power to split a mountain. Behind Zen Master Yu, above her, below her, to her left, and to her right, 5 cracks in the sky suddenly opened. Chu Shanhua had already left. Do Zhao could show the ferocity of Tian Fa without restraint. The space that enveloped Zen Master Yu was like a glass mirror that suddenly broke. Cracks exploded like a spider web, and Zen Master Yu was the core of those cracks. She was also the prey of this spider web, but she looked at Do Zhao with a calm gaze. "You made me angry," she said in a sluggish voice. Her tone did not fluctuate, but one could feel her anger. The last syllable, in the calmness, actually died a grand response. "Come." His voice reverberated endlessly in the air. Behind her, the silhouette of an angry Buddha appeared. Her hands, which glowed with a brass luster, reached out of her sleeves and clasped her palms together. At the same time, the glaring Buddha behind him clasped his palms together. "Pa!" Her speed seemed ordinary, and her movements were not powerful enough. But when she put her palms together, she caught Do Zhao's blade. It was impossible, but it actually happened. The Buddha had compassion in his heart, but the Buddha also had a Vajra glare. Under the blessings of the glaring Buddha statue, they carried out Buddhist decrees on behalf of the Buddha, recited the Buddha's will, and their every word and action was Buddha's. How could it be impossible for a Buddha to stop a butcher's knife? Do Zhao held the knife and pressed it down silently. He felt that the Tian Shao saber was slashing at the boundless earth. No matter how big the wound was to a human, it might just be a tiny opening on the earth. He tried to lift it up, but he felt 2 towering mountains pressing down on the Tian Shao saber. Without a doubt, he had been suppressed by Zen Master Moon in terms of physical strength. At the same time, Zen Master Moon's body emitted a golden light. The heavenly punishment had already descended. 5 consecutive heavenly fissures opened around her, but not a single one cracked on her body. She had really become the starting point of the spider web and escaped the lock of all the heavenly fissures. How'd she do it? Do Zhao did not understand for a moment, but he grinned slightly and smiled. He felt happy. The stronger the opponent, the happier he would be. The more it broke his imagination, the more it amazed him, and the more he would be elated. If there were no heroes in the world, how lonely would the Tian Shao saber be? All right, he held the Tian Shao saber and confronted Zen Master Moon. The flowing starlight in the sky once again took out the god-slaying saber and slashed at the glaring Buddha statue. But there seemed to be such a resonating sound. The The sky was golden and dazzling. Golden light fell like rain. That was not Buddhist light. That was Zen Master Moon's starlight. Zen Master Moon. She was also an outer sect cultivator who had mastered her own path of Tao and could already manifest the killing power of her path of Tao. The starlight poured down and dyed a new world full of hope. There was peace, warmth, sunlight, and tranquility here. There was no bullying, no harm, no disease, no war. The world was full of storms, but this place was peaceful and auspicious. This was her pure land. She was close to Buddha here. The glaring Buddha statue behind her did not change its expression, but its eyes turned slightly and became benevolent. It was benevolent and kind to all living beings. In this benevolence, a second pair of arms grew. The glazed blue arms were raised high above her head. They also closed their palms and caught Do Zhao's god-slaying saber. Do Zhao's face became even brighter. He was already excited. What excited him the most was not the path that Yu Tianyu showed, but her pure land. This was similar to the power of spiritual sense enveloping. I feel like a god descending. How did Yu Tianyu master it at the outer sect level? Her spirit was clearly far from the level of condensing spiritual sense, but she could do it to this extent. He liked this kind of power that broke the rules. He liked this kind of power that he could not see the source of. This made him feel that this world had infinite possibilities, so he could also climb infinitely. People were often afraid that the road ahead was too far and the mountain was too high. Therefore, they slacked off and had the heart to retreat. And some people were afraid that the road ahead was not far enough, the mountain was not high enough, and they could not show their true heroism. Do Zhao often felt that this was a world that could accommodate all his ambitions and talents. How lucky he was to be born in this world. But his eyes were calm. Before he blinked, they were as clear as a mirror, but after he blinked, they were as muddy as mud. His Tianshao saber was still between Zen Master Yu's palms. His god-slaying saber was also blocked by the four-armed Buddha. But he had already attacked. The 7 fighting styles, cutting nature to see me. The killing intent of this saber intent directly cut into the depths of Yu Tianyu's consciousness. A hint of confusion appeared in her tranquil eyes that were filled with Buddhist light. Cutting nature to see me. Who am I? In countless moments when they were alone, how could she not ask this question? Who am I? I am a little nun in the cleansing moon nunnery who worships Buddha. I am a monk who meditates in front of an oil lamp and ancient Buddha. Yu Tianyu was shocked. She woke up, but her palms had already loosened. After her will was cut open, her spirit had already been ruthlessly cut open. She could not suppress the pain. Even with the suppression of the Buddha Dharma form, it could only stop the momentum of the collapse. Do Zhao's Tianshao saber turned between her palms and cut off a few fingers. He took the opportunity to swipe and cut between her chest and abdomen. Her skin was destroyed. When Do Zhao dropped the saber, he already felt that something was wrong. Just as he was about to change his stance, Yu Tianyu, who had already adjusted herself, pushed him away with her palm. The power of the entire Pure Land was expelling him at this time. Do Zhao casually turned around and returned to his original position. At this time, it had only been less than 5 breaths since he killed Chu Shenhua and eliminated him. Because he flew very high, Chu Shenhua's body did not even fall into the sea. Right in front of him, Yu Tianyu, who had barely kept her life, had her cloak and gray robe torn apart. They were broken into strands. Although Yu Tianyu put on her monk robe at once, her naked body was still clearly seen by Do Zhao. Do Zhao's eyes were first surprised, then he understood. Because what he saw was a body without any sexual characteristics. There were hands and feet, skin and bones, flesh and blood, but there were no sexual characteristics and no internal organs. On her skin, there was a brass luster. The genius disciple of the cleansing moon nunnery, Yu Tianyu, was actually a puppet. How could a person be a puppet? How could a person with a puppet body cultivate in a Buddhist sect like the cleansing moon nunnery? This was a little inconceivable, But it was also because of this that Dou Zhao understood why his physical strength was inferior to hers. His fists were just fists, but Yu Qiannu's fists were covered in countless fine formation patterns. Yu Qiannu's face was ordinary. Except for the brass luster, she was no different from an ordinary woman. Even though she had exposed her puppet body, her expression was still calm. In other words, her puppet body was expressionless to begin with. She quickly took out a few fingers and flattened them with a flick of her pinky. With a light press, the severed part was reconnected. She clenched her 10 fingers and reconnected her strength. And in the sea, the young Zhuo Guangshu, with the blood at the corner of his mouth still wet, barely got rid of the influence of his skin. He poked his upper body out of the water, opened his arms, and reached out to catch Chu Xunhua's body. But before he could catch it, Chu Xunhua's body disappeared. It had been taken away by the rules of the Mountain Sea realm. Zhuo Guangshu was stunned. At this moment, he had completely forgotten the rules of the Mountain Sea realm. He had completely forgotten that Chu Xunhua had only lost 30% of his divine soul origin, and the Chu family must have a way to make up for it. He only knew that Chu Xunhua had disappeared in front of his eyes. He opened his mouth slightly, but no sound came out. Had he really grown up? Could he really shoulder the storm? Could he really protect the people he cherished? Rumble, rumble. He couldn't make a sound. However, the entire sea was enraged. This was the wrath of the river god, the wrath of the water god. The roaring and surging waves rolled in from all directions, wrapped around Zhuo Guangshu's body, and clustered around him, making him infinitely taller and stronger. Right in front of Dou Zhao, on the endless sea surface, a giant spirit of the sea more than 200 feet tall stood up. His face was blurry, and his body was majestic. A ferocious black dragon was wrapped around his left arm, and his right hand held a big blue axe. With a light leap, he was parallel to Dou Zhao, and the sea caved in, forming a deep pit. The axe slashed down. With the support of the power of the sea, this huge axe caused the space to tremble, and a hurricane appeared in the air. Dou Zhao was already smaller than an ant. Yu Qiannu, who had hurriedly repaired her limbs, rushed back. The four-armed Buddha statue behind her was still fighting with the starlight god-slaying saber. Her power had been deep into this world, and she wanted to turn the space within a certain range into her pure land. Dou Zhao was the only unclean person in that pure land. At this moment, Yu Qiannu's right palm was placed in front of her, and her left hand was in the shape of a bowl. Her face was benevolent. When she approached, her eyes turned, and she revealed a dignified look. Her left hand suddenly flipped, indicating that she wanted to subdue him. Her power and influence were all shackling Dou Zhao, creating an opportunity for the giant spirit of the sea to swing his axe. Using the path of Tao to fight the path of Tao, using the power of the pure land to suppress the seal. Lightning flashed, thunder rumbled, and a storm seemed to be a very distant thing. This pure land had infinite light. The giant spirit of the sea also seemed to be covered in Buddha's might, like the guardian of the pure land. Everything was describing life and death. In front of such a terrifying attack, Dou Zhao's body finally ignited with a wisp of golden light. Dazzling golden light flowed around his body. "Is there a more exciting performance?" Dou Zhao asked, his eyes burning with arrogance. The dazzling golden light quickly flowed through his body, dyeing his flesh, hair, clothes, and saber. Everything about him brilliant. His gentleness turned into arrogance. He was finally satisfied. One was a golden puppet of the outer path of Tao Tower, a genius cultivator of the cleansing moon nunnery. The other was a possessor of the river god's ability in the sea of rage, who had unleashed his potential. This was a real opponent. Otherwise, after fighting for so long, he couldn't find any excitement except for facing Chu Xunhua's heaven-shrouding divine ability. He had long been tired of fighting without any sense of danger. Otherwise, why would he look for Zhiyan alone? At this moment, Yu Qiannu controlled the power of the pure land, as if it was the sky of this place. Zhuo Guangshu used some unknown method to activate the river god's ability, gathering the power of the sea and becoming a giant spirit of the sea, like a god. The sky wanted to subdue him, and the god wanted to kill him. In the face of all this, Dojao smiled arrogantly. His body was full of unyielding light, and his eyes were full of unyielding madness. Brilliant and ostentatious, he only lightly slashed with the Tianshao saber, following a subtle trajectory, and easily cut open the so-called shackles of the Pure Land's power. Then he swung the saber back, rolling up endless calamity aura into the sky. Once again, he used the saber of man-made calamity to attack the Buddhist light of this place. Under the state of the battle golden body, the lethality of the 7 battle styles skyrocketed again. Endless calamity aura covered everything in the Buddhist light, instantly polluting this pure land. Everyone suffered. Everyone suffered. How could there be a pure land? It was just an illusion. One slash to kill. Yu Qiannu was still pressing the subduing Madra, but she had been completely overturned. The pure land she condensed with a special technique was shattered, and she had suffered unprecedented damage. At this moment, the sea giant spirit's giant axe was about to fall. Dojao only pulled the Tianshao saber back, and so naturally blocked the giant axe above his head. His movements were too casual, but it was also too natural and too perfect. Bam! The sea giant spirit, which was more than 200 feet tall, gathered the power of the sea and chopped down with the axe, but only made a dull sound. Dojao was suspended in the air, and there was no support under his feet, but he did not move at all. He was as small as a speck of light, but he was as brilliant as the sun. The small Tianshao saber was not much stronger than a strand of hair in front of the giant axe condensed from the seawater, but it was like a firm boundary, stating an unchangeable rule, and had already blocked everything outside. In such a confrontation, Dojao raised his head and smiled brightly at the sea giant spirit's face. Then he crossed the Tianshao saber, and his entire body slammed forward into the sea giant spirit's body. The blue sea giant spirit wrapped around Dojao as if it had swallowed an ant. Its body was like angry waves, and there was nothing strange about it. But in the next moment, seemingly endless saber light burst out. The terrifying sea giant spirit collapsed on the spot, and a waterfall poured down from the sky. Whoosh! Zhua Guangshu, who was in the waterfall, fell powerlessly. Today's giant sea spirit was indeed the strongest it had ever been in its life, but it was still difficult to deal with such a Dojao. When it was at its most glorious, it had been slashed. The young Zhua Guangshu, with such a regretful thought, fell again. Chapter 1453. Dojao held a long blade in his hand, his golden body shining as he stood proudly in the sky. Yu Qiannu's pure land had been shattered, and Zhua Guangshu's sea giant spirit had collapsed. Dojao's fighting spirit was still boiling, but there was no opponent in front of him. After such a battle that should have been enjoyable to the fullest, he felt lonely. He seemed to have heard Tianzhao's sigh. It was so faint and regretful. Even so, he still held his blade and advanced toward Yu Qiannu, who was still flying backward. He wanted to draw a regretful end to this battle. After all, everything in the world had an end. But in the next moment, he paused and looked back. What he saw was a figure that was like a rainbow sweeping across the sea, shooting over from a distance that he could see. He felt a fearless aura that almost reached the sky and crashed into the sea. He heard the sound of a sword. It was so clear and murderous. In his field of vision, that person came across the sea and caught Zhua Guangshu in one swift motion. Then, the figure stabilized and the face became clear. The continuous blue cloud mark behind him dissipated one by one. That person held Zhua Guangshu with one hand, but looked up at him. That pair of eyes was very clear and very determined. Even Chu Shanhua, who had the ultimate abhijna, and Yu Qiannu, who could create pure land in the outer sect, could not help but look at him with fear. But this person did not. He only had fighting spirit. Do Zhao almost immediately turned around and faced him with his blade. Yu Qiannu would not be able to fight in a short time, so he did not need to care. And he was looking forward to it. What about Jiang Qingyang, who was promoted by Yu Beidu as the top intersect disciple in history? 3 against 1, 1 dead and 2 crippled. Although he had always known that Do Zhao was strong, he could not help but feel despair. Anger was useless. Madness was useless. In the end, strength spoke for everything. Zhuo Guangshu fell powerlessly, but what he thought of was the figure that had left long ago. He had been working very hard, cultivating day and night, fighting day and night. He had studied almost all the water-related books that the Zhuo family had found for him. In the great illusionary realm, he had fought countless people. Ever since he was young, he had lived a life of luxury. Even in an environment like the mountain and sea purgatory, he had never complained. He was sure that he had given his all, but he still had to face such a stark difference. It was like a natural chasm. There are so many talents in Great Chu. Elder brother was able to suppress his peers. Just how desperate was he? In those moments that he was unaware of, how did his elder brother move forward? Wait for me to return. Forever the hand that ruffled his hair, forever this sentence. When he began to face the wind and rain alone, when he walked forward alone, he began to understand more and more the gentleness of that hand. The cruelty and danger of the world, all the wind, frost, rain, and snow were blocked behind. He gasped. However, the sharp saber chi was still cutting and colliding inside his body. He struggled, but he couldn't muster up any extra strength. Just like him, he almost cried out loud, but he wasn't sure if he made a sound or not. At this moment, he felt that he had fallen into a soft force. His back was supported by a palm. There was a very strong touch that made him feel at ease. A strong but gentle vital essence was transmitted over. It first protected his vital points, and then spread to his limbs and bones. The saber chi that was still raging in his body was expelled. He opened his dazed eyes and saw a clear jawline. "Brother," he called out. Jiang Wang didn't lower his head. Who could look away in a confrontation with Do Zhao? At this moment, Do Zhao's golden body was resplendent, standing proudly in the sky. And he was standing on the clear sea waves, holding Zhuo Guangshu in his left hand and Sauvignon Blanc in his right. The green-robed man stood alone. He expelled the saber chi raging in Zhuo Guangshu's body and heard that soft call. "Rest for a while." He just said so. He slowly half-knelt and placed Zhuo Guangshu flat on the sea surface. Throughout the entire process, he stared fixedly at Do Zhao's eyes, maintaining a state where he could draw his sword at any time. Someone as proud as Do Zhao would probably not make a move at this time. However, this kind of vigilance that would not give him a chance showed his respect for Do Zhao. The sea waves were like a mirror, gently holding Zhuo Guangshu. The upright man in the green robe slowly straightened up. Then he rose. Bang! The air exploded. During this process, the frost-white clothes were spread out behind him. The scarlet flames flowed around his body, and the sword light jumped in his eyes. An incomparably majestic aura was resplendent in the sky. The immortal state of sound was activated. The sword immortal had arrived. Ripples appeared on the surface of the sea as his boots stepped on it. However, it was extremely thin and shallow, almost undetectable. It was just a natural ripple. It spread until it was far away from Zhuo Guangshu's position before it suddenly set off a raging wave. No words were spoken. In the first battle between Jiang Wang and Do Zhao, there was no opening speech between the two of them. They just looked at each other with eyes full of fighting spirit. The tip of Sauvignon Blanc's sword rushed up diagonally and collided with the blade of the Tianshao saber. A point collided with a line. This was the opening. The sound was crisp, but there was also a kind of intensity and unwillingness. A huge ripple spread out, pushing away the air and pouncing in all directions. The chi waves surged like a tide, spreading out for more than 300 feet. It even caught up with Yu Qiannu, who had just stabilized her body. She raised her hand with difficulty and summoned a Maharaga with a human body and a snake head to block in front of her. Only then was she not swept away by the chi wave. A terrifying confrontation. The two people collided in the air. One had a resplendent golden body. The other had a cloak bathed in fire. How could the peerless Tianjiao be willing to give way when the famous weapons of the world collided with life and death? The sword energy and the saber energy were still tearing at each other. Dou Zhao held the saber with both hands and pulled it down. The blade of the Tian Shao saber walked on the tip of Sauvignon Blanc's sword for a while. Amidst the ear-piercing scraping sound, a long line of dazzling sparks exploded. Attack against attack. The sword immortal was chopped down from the sky. Jiang Wang fell straight down. He completely felt the power, the feeling of those people on the river viewing platform facing Dou Zhao. That dazzling golden figure brought about a sense of oppression everywhere. As he fell, he pressed down with one hand. A brilliant and dazzling fire world spread out in the sky with him as the center. Flame flowers bloomed, flame sparrows flew. An entire world of fire was full of vitality. It was not only a barrier that he had set up, but also something that he relied on. And Dou Zhao chased after him. His resplendent golden body directly crashed into the fire world and slashed down. The raging flames burned his body, but they could not burn through the golden light. Jiang Wang pulled his sword horizontally and blocked it with the sword of a famous scholar. However, this elegant horizontal line was unable to be completed, because the moment the Tian Shao saber came into contact with Sauvignon Blanc, it was instantly pulled back and then slashed down at an even faster speed. The saber energy that had clearly been formed was actually so easily withdrawn and could erupt again in an instant. It was completely at will. This was really the ultimate realm of saber techniques. Jiang Wang's horizontal line that separated life and death could not be pulled any further. He could only cross in the sky and block this slash. Clang. It made such a fierce sound. Clang, clang, clang. Dou Zhao actually used his battle golden body to withstand the damage of the fire world. He raised his saber and slashed again and again. The heavy saber kept slashing down, and the broken saber light also protected him at the same time. He did not completely rely on the battle golden body's defense, but he did not want to slow down the rhythm of his attack at all. Therefore, he put his defense into the attack. He only used the broken saber light after the collision to resist the fire world. This was an indescribable confidence. It was also indescribably powerful. Clang, 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 clang. The sound echoed and washed over the surroundings. It was wanton and sorrowful. This sound was not an ordinary sound of metal. It was the sound of the sea of bitterness that Dou Zhao used his saber to knock on the sword. Back at the Riverview platform, he still had to shout it out. Now, he had already incorporated it into his saber technique. However, this extraordinary sound-killing technique did not get close to Jiang Wang's ears at all. Before it got close, it had already been subdued by the sound of the immortal state. The sound of 10,000 chants did not care whether you were Taoist or Buddhist, whether you were righteous or sorrowful, whether you were the one who killed me or worshipped me. All would come to me. Jiang Wang pretended to be calm, but he could not help but frown. He used details to show that he had already been disturbed by the sound of the sea of bitterness and was just pretending to be calm. He wanted to lead Dou Zhao to make a wrong judgment. In a battle of this level, he knew that all the details would be captured. However, Dou Zhao was not affected at all. Wherever his saber went, he only slashed again and again. He seemed to have an innate confidence. He was certain that the trajectory of the Tian Shao saber was the right path. The dazzling saber light wreaked havoc in the fire world. Dou Zhao slashed 17 times in a row, cutting down the sword immortal until he left the range of the fire world. The brilliant world of fire burned behind the dazzling golden body. It gradually went further and further away. Jiang Wang held on to the defense of the yearning saber and did not let the saber chi advance. His breath moved, and a frosty white wind blew out. It turned into a killing nail halfway and pointed at the center of Dou Zhao's brows. Under his intentional control, the killing nail appeared so gentle. It restrained all the killing intent and looked ordinary. It was as if it was difficult to nail into a wall and could only nail into a piece of wood. Dou Zhao curled his lips as if he had the urge to laugh at Jiang Wang's clumsy cover. However, he did not say anything. In the fierce slash, he suddenly turned the blade with a touch of dim light. He slashed the killing nail and scattered it, sending back a wisp of frosty wind. It was the destruction of divinity. He firmly grasped the initiative of the battle. Of course, he could withdraw his saber at any time. However, he also had to admit that the killing power of Jiang Wang's nail was too terrifying. It was not that he chose to withdraw his saber to slash, but that he had no choice. His power was interrupted, and he knew too well how terrifying it was to be controlled by the enemy in a battle. Therefore, after he scattered the killing nail, he immediately withdrew his saber and defended his central palace. It was also at this moment Jiang Wang's long sword was finally drawn. After 10 years of bitter suppression and waiting, this sword strike, which had been filled with hatred for life and death, finally shone with a sharpness even brighter than before. After blocking Dou Zhao's 17 consecutive strikes, Jiang Wang's hand was already split open. Blood stained the hilt of his sword. However, he held it so steadily. This horizontal movement was still so confident and decisive. Clang! Dou Zhao still used the destruction of divinity to block Xiangxi's slash. He took the opportunity to counterattack. However, Jiang Wang had already withdrawn his long sword. His left hand, which had already completed the seal, gently lifted up. At this moment, heaven and earth should regret. Flame flowers bloomed in the human world. Huge doors and thick walls, wine shops, peddlers and servants, pavilions and towers. Just like that, the gorgeous Flame City was lifted up by his hand and pressed directly against Dou Zhao. Flame Flower City Incineration. At this moment, Dou Zhao had the fire world behind him and the Flame Flower City in front of him. One was a combination of supernatural powers. The other was a supreme grade. He was calm. With a shake of his long saber, Heaven's punishment was slashed out. One slash split in two. Two huge cracks in the sky. One was in front, slashing the Flame Flower City in front of it. The other was behind, directly cutting through the fire world. Jiang Wang had deliberately hidden the possibility of the fire world exploding. Just because of a change in the battle situation, he had already noticed it. What an amazing sense of battle. Boom! Jiang Wang had no choice but to detonate the fire world in advance. This world of fire was full of vitality, and it had given birth to enough power in the midst of destruction. A huge wave of flames rushed toward Dou Zhao, but it was intercepted in front of another huge crack in the sky. And in front of Dou Zhao, the flame-carved pavilions and towers gradually disintegrated. He shattered the Flame Flower City, destroyed the fire world, and slashed again. A crack in the sky opened right where Jiang Wang was. A crack in the sky blocked in front of him. Another crack in the sky blocked behind him. One slash, three slashes. Jiang Wang turned his feet, floating like an immortal. However, he avoided the obstruction of three cracks in the sky in succession. He drew a mysterious arc in the air and closed in on Dou Zhao. The heavenly saber slashed again. One slash, the limit of 13 slashes. The ferocious cracks in the sky crisscrossed, cutting this space into pieces. But Jiang Wang's posture was still elegant. He stepped on the green clouds, turning left and right calmly. Of course, the cracks in the sky were terrifying, but not a single one could touch him. He had already seen the space-splitting divine power of the sea race powerhouses. He had also seen Dou Zhao's battle on the river viewing platform. Even Qin Zhizhen's refined Void 8 Extreme Blade was similar to this. The cracks in the sky were not as fast and sudden as the space-splitting divine power. Although they might be more powerful in Dou Zhao's hands, if they could not hit him, then no matter how powerful they were useless. Of course, Dou Zhao had another choice. As long as he slashed at Zhuo Guangshu, Jiang Wang would have no choice but to take it head-on. But with his pride, he naturally disdained this. Jiang Wang walked in the air as if he was walking on flat ground. From afar, it looked like he was walking on the cracks in the sky. In a flash, he was already close to Dou Zhao. A new battle was being laid out. How would the chess game evolve in the square inch of space? Dou Zhao only waved his long saber and invited him to come. He had the confidence to face any move. And at the moment when he was close, Jiang Wang suddenly sped up. The stars in the sky swayed and fell. He, who should have been more cautious, was now incomparably unrestrained as his eyes shone with sword light. Secret treasure, chasing wind opened. Secret treasure, cape opened. Secret treasure, perishing god opened. His speed was increased, and the long Xiangxi sword became sharper. It also strengthened the power of the spirit attack. 5 blazing white light sources in front of his chest lit up one by one. 5 palaces opened, and he looked like an immortal. At this moment, he directly raised his sword and slashed, gathering all of his peak strength for a single slash. He did not have any warning, nor did he have any place to hide. At such an inappropriate time, he directly launched a fatal slash, because he had already realized that the person in front of him had superb battle awareness. Any action that led to the battle would be captured by his battle intent. To fight with such a person, it was not the right time, but the most appropriate time. Chapter 1454. In the dark distance, the violent wind, rain, and thunder were all reduced to the background. The high dome was like an isolated island. The broken pure land, the scattered golden light, the chaotic elemental energy, the saber energy, sword energy, and the flowing wind. There was also the smell of blood in the air. The power of the shattered spirit seemed to be wailing in the wind. This was the Sky Dome battlefield after a series of battles. However, there was no way to hide this sword strike. It cut across the sky. It was as if a god had pushed down the pillar that supported the sky and then used this peak as a sword to kill the heavens. The entire Sky Dome battlefield was purged. The cracks in the sky were forcibly flattened. The body of the heavenly palace, the state of the sword immortal, the state of the sound immortal, the support of the star tower, the secret chamber opened. Jiang Wang burned everything in an instant. Such a him, such a peerless sword. Who could stop him? Dou Zhao raised his eyebrows. He had already predicted countless possibilities, but Jiang Wang's sword was still beyond his expectations. He had enough confidence to play a game of chess with Jiang Wang. He was also conceited that he could suppress the Yellow River's leader with his superior saber skills. However, he had never thought that Jiang Wang would so hastily and recklessly trigger a life and death battle. It was like an elephant show in the early stages of a layout. Both sides set up their chariots and horses, advancing step by step, fighting for the advantage of one soldier. But that guy went for a checkmate. It was meaningless and brainless to chase after a checkmate. Other than wasting an opportunity to attack and exposing one's own weakness, what else could it do? He was clearly a peerless expert, but he played a beginner's chess game. It inevitably made Dou Zhao feel a sense of absurdity. But in the next moment, he was shocked by the danger. There was no other reason. Jiang Wang's sword was too fierce and too strong. It was so strong that it could brew a real, killing intent at the worst time. Sometimes, fighting was like chess. After all, it was different from chess. No matter how good the two sides were at chess, the chariot was against the chariot, and the horse was against the horse. But in a real battle, there was a difference in strength between two pawns. The power of Jiang Wang's sword had already transcended timing. In the meaningless chess piece, a bright light erupted. The killing power of this move came from outside the chessboard. Dou Zhao swung his blade horizontally without hesitation. This blade was upright, bright, and extremely dazzling. It was as if a Buddha had descended into the world, and it was endlessly dignified. His chaotic punches hit an empty door, and all the routines were useless. He had no choice but to fight back. It could only slash out the 5 decay of the celestial being. because in such a rushed situation, none of his slashes could be perfect. Other than the celestial being's 5 decay, none of the other moves could give him the confidence to take on this sword. This was the most powerful move in the 7 fighting styles. Of course, it was out of respect for Jiang Wang. The saber and the sword clashed once again. The center of the boundless splendor was actually peaceful. No sound could be heard because everything in the center of the battle had been completely erased. Sound, airwaves, and even light and shadow. The center where the sword and saber collided fell into a kind of silent shattering. Everything was falling apart. No matter what was involved, it would immediately be torn to shreds. Yu Tianyu stared at the battlefield in shock. She had never thought that Jiang Wang could fight Dou Zhao to this extent. And in the next moment, Dou Zhao retreated. Dou Zhao was knocked back. Puff! He even spat out a mouthful of blood. The blood contained fragments of his internal organs. Even his battle golden body dimmed by 30%. Dou Zhao was actually defeated? Almost at the same time that this thought appeared, the sword immortal who was blocking Dou Zhao and charging forward. The 5 blazing white light sources in front of his chest and abdomen were extinguished at the same time. The flowing fire around his body lost control and drifted down. The frosty white battle cloak dissipated. His neat green robe was stained at some point. Jiang Wang's jet black hair had actually dried up. Sticky sweat kept oozing out his body. His body began to stink. His eyes also became dazed. Jiang Wang's sword had indeed repelled Dou Zhao and seriously injured him. But Dou Zhao's slash, it had cut Tianfu into 5 ordinary prefectures. It had cut an immortal into a mortal. It was even weakening and withering. Jiang Wang was still charging at Dou Zhao, but his strength was clearly weakening. His strength was constantly weakening, and his fire of life was constantly weakening. He had fallen into the 5 signs of decay, but he still suppressed Dou Zhao and charged forward. He was not dead, and his sword momentum was not over. Astonishing willpower, perfect control. Even someone as proud as Dou Zhao could not stop. He could only retreat again and again. Jiang Wang had seen the scene of the 5 signs of Deva fighting the sun, moon, and stars triple wheel slash on the river observation platform. At that time, he could not help but be amazed. Today, he experienced it firsthand. Only then did he know what Yung Ganzuan was facing at that time. Unlike Yung Ganzuan, he had used an extremely reckless posture to hastily trigger a life-and-death battle, forcing Dou Zhao to kill him. To a certain extent, he had taken the initiative. Dou Zhao's 5 signs of Deva had not been perfected, and he had already been tempered by starlight twice. At this time, he had manifested his Qianfu body, descended into the state of a sword immortal, and wore the Rui immortal robe. More importantly, Dou Zhao did not directly slash him. Instead, he used the 5 signs of Deva to blast the ultimate overturning sword under the control of a sword immortal. But despite so many prerequisites, he was still slashed into such a state. Did Dou Zhao have a weakness? At least until now, Jiang Wang had not noticed it. He could only stare at Dou Zhao's eyes and charge forward so firmly and decisively. It was as if he had to try to kill the other party before his life was exhausted, no matter how slim the hope was. Dou Zhao felt such willpower and grinned. There was an arrogant arc at the corner of his bloody mouth. I see Tianfu again. It said that Tianfu is unparalleled, but I don't think it's anything special. Jiang Wang resisted him. In the face of a strong wind, he only said, I think the way you vomit blood is surprisingly beautiful. Ha ha! Dou Zhao's long hair danced in the wind. His golden body retreated, his hand pressed on the long knife, and he laughed arrogantly. I'm beginning to admire you. Is that so? The light of the 5 mystical abilities shone on Jiang Wang's body. His Tao energy surged like a tide, and his power boiled. Jiang Wang's voice became even calmer as he said, Words are no guarantee. How about I borrow your head? Sky Dawn and Chang Xiangxi were against each other, and their forces fought crazily. Dou Zhao was pushed further and further away, but he did not hide his brilliance. Ever since the Tianfu Elder, the Five Prefectures' glory has become a legend. If you ask me, it's just SOSO. Starlight gathered for him, and the god-slaying knife appeared in the sky. You are born strong, and I am invincible. A big hand formed by Starlight held the god-slaying knife and slashed through the air. At this moment, Do Zhao truly displayed the killing power of his path. It was far stronger than his performance when he fought the Moon Heavenly Slave. The god-slaying knife actually slashed out with the skin defeat, using the light of the Star Tower to control the 7 fighting styles. What kind of terrifying method was this? It happened to be the path of battle. It was said that the path was long, but Do Zhao had already reached a higher level. Facing this person, this knife, this path, Jiang Wang only said calmly, "You seem to have forgotten. The person who broke the legend of the Tianfu sect on the Riverview platform was me, not you." He was describing the truth. This was a kind of force. The glory forged in the past was not useless. Victory after victory had accumulated the confidence of being invincible. He was still immersed in the unfinished sword force and rushed forward against Do Zhao. But his breath exhaled a wisp of frost wind, and it floated out. The Buzhou wind shattered everything, and it directly met the god-slaying knife in the sky. With just a sweep, it disappeared with the god-slaying knife. Do Zhao was extremely excited. His eyes were full of fighting spirit. "Come, fight to the death with me." Starlight gathered again like a waterfall, and the god-slaying knife was once again wielded in the Starlight hand. His magnificent martial robe fluttered in the wind. He was issuing such an invitation. Putting aside life and death, he only sought the most brilliant battle. And Jiang Wang said, "I will not disappoint you." He opened his mouth slightly, wanted to blow the Buzhou wind. Do Zhao subconsciously raised his guard. But Jiang Wang suddenly retracted his sword, and his figure flitted away like a swan. He even pushed out a clump of true samadhi fire, which spread out into a net of fire, blocking behind him. "Let's go," he shouted. He gritted his teeth and left without hesitation. The mechanical Maharaja, who had been waiting near the battlefield, held Yu Qiannu with one hand and flew down. Its other hand reached into the water and scooped up Zhuo Guangshu. In an instant, it flew far away. Yu Qiannu, whose spirit had been injured and whose pure land had been broken, had lost the ability to interfere in the battle, but her vision was still there. Of course, she would not be a hindrance at a time like this. Do Zhao was furious. "When I fought with you, you wanted to fight to the death with me. When I rolled up my sleeves and fought with you, you ran away. You treated this battle as child's play. Did you not take me, Do Zhao, seriously?" The mechanical Maharaja and Jiang Wang, one in front and one behind, fled at lightning speed. Do Zhao's golden body shone brightly. He ignored everything and smashed through the net of fire in front of him. He slashed through the air and charged out of heavenly punishment. 3 fissures in the sky suddenly opened. Jiang Wang leisurely strolled away, calmly avoiding them. But this time, Do Zhao's ostentatious figure leapt out of the crack in the sky to his right, borrowing the power of heavenly punishment to attack. Jiang Wang suddenly turned around and slapped down with his palm. Endless wind flowed around his fingers. No less than 6 killing growth spikes were aimed at Do Zhao's wrists, knees, forehead, and heart. Their shrill howls were filled with undisguised killing intent. What a counterattack! How is this fleeing? This was clearly a long-planned killing blow. Do Zhao's ability to use heavenly punishment to move was no secret on the river viewing platform. How could Jiang Wang not know? After fighting for so many rounds, how could he not have predicted where Do Zhao would land? At this juncture of life and death, Do Zhao slightly twisted his saber. The saber energy that had already taken shape suddenly changed, easily transforming into divinity obliteration. The saber's edge flowed with a dim light. The heavenly saber and the killing spikes collided. Ding, ding, ding. Under the drifting frost and wind, Do Zhao performed magnificently. In this moment of imminent peril, He used divinity obliteration 5 times in succession, shattering 5 killing spikes in succession. But his saber energy had finally run out. Faced with the last killing spike aimed at his right knee, he could only retreat. He retreated into the crack in the sky. He did not possess the ability to travel through the void. He could only transform into a saber and appear with the saber energy of heavenly punishment. Now that he had turned around, he naturally returned to his original position. When he raised his head to look again, Jiang Wang had already flown far away. There was no need to talk about the mechanical Maharaga. It was only a black dot now. How could Do Zhao give up? He still slashed out with heavenly punishment. This time, the crack in the sky was not aimed at Jiang Wang. Instead, it opened up some distance between Jiang Wang and himself. He only used this move to hasten his journey. He no longer hoped that this saber strike would affect Jiang Wang. He already understood Qin Zhizhen's feelings that day on the river viewing platform. But an accident happened once again. When Do Zhao's brilliant figure leaped out of the crack in the sky, what he saw was not Jiang Wang's frantically fleeing back. Blue cloud marks shattered in the air. Jiang Wang actually charged toward him at a terrifying speed. He actually came to kill him. His face was pale, his hair was withered, his clothes were stained, and his body stank. But his eyes still showed how clean a person he was. Those clear eyes turned an instant and turned crimson gold. A pair of golden eyes burned with crimson flames. He rode into the formation and directly opened it. His spirit fell to the west and charged toward Do Zhao's heavenly palace. A great sun crashed down with a howl. The entire spirit level darkened. It was terrifying, as if doomsday had arrived. Do Zhao, who had manifested his spirit, only raised his eyes and glanced at it. Then he raised his saber. His long saber slashed down diagonally. His body and spirit moved at the same time. His appearance seemed to have aged slightly, and his spirit seemed to have weakened slightly. His body and spirit weakened, and then he killed the enemy. This saber's body and spirit decayed, and it specialized in killing spirits. The great sun at the spirit level was split into 2. The single rider entered the formation and was directly cut open. Jiang Wang's spirit manifestation had already withdrawn when Do Zhao raised his saber. Do Zhao's body and spirit decayed. Of course, he wouldn't rush into Jiang Wang's heavenly palace. His saber momentum changed again. He charged straight in and hit the center door. It was to cut off one's nature to see me. Cutting off one's nature to see me was a top-notch killing technique, the supreme intent saber. It didn't attack the spirit, but the willpower. After the willpower was cut off, one could kill the body and the spirit at will. Of course, it wasn't just a saber that questioned the heart, and it wasn't just seeing me. It was to cut through the disguise and see the self under the layers of protection. Cutting off all nature, one could see the most real, naked, and fragile self. Thus, one saber erased it. In everyone's heart, there was a child hugging their knees and crying. This saber had once caused Gan Chong into collapse and Yu Tianyu to be in a trance. This saber slashed at Jiang Wang. On the level of willpower, it seemed to have struck a crimson gold heart. Sparks flew in all directions, but this heart remained unmoved. Cutting off one's nature to see me, I am Jiang Wang. My heart is bright. What else can I say? Jiang Wang, who was outside, stared straight at Do Zhao. A fire net woven from the true samadhi fire casually spread out on Do Zhao's body. It was like an idle chess piece that was casually added. At the same time, the long sword collided forward, bursting with killing intent, and slashed out with the human sword. No matter how one looked at it, the fire net was just an addition. No matter how one looked at it, the human sword, which was becoming more and more complete, was the killing move. Moreover, he had seen the true samadhi fire on the river viewing platform. It wasn't weak, but it wasn't to the extent that it could threaten him. Previously, it had already shattered the fire net once. At this moment, this fire net looked no different from before. What was there to be afraid of? Do Zhao should have focused his attention to deal with that sword. And that was indeed what he did. However, just as he raised his long saber, A warning sign suddenly appeared in his heart. How could Jiang Qingyang, who was able to fight with him to such an extent, leave a useless child in the battle? Dou Zhao had a hunch in his heart. The first fire net that he shattered at that time was a scam. It was just to cover up the success of this fire net. The real killing power of this supernatural power was probably hidden in this second fire net. Dou Zhao didn't even take the sword. Without hesitation, he retreated into the crack in the sky and returned to his original place. When he looked up again, the blazing fire net and the indomitable sword style had all disappeared. Where was Jiang Wang's figure? He had chased after him twice in a row and was forced to retreat twice in a row. He clearly had the advantage in terms of strength, but he still let him escape. Even until now, he wasn't sure if the fire net that Jiang Wang spread out in the end really had the ability to kill him. That might be a long-term mystery that could only be solved by the next Jiang Wang he met. Dou Zhao wasn't angry. Instead, he laughed. Interesting. Too interesting. He even laughed loudly, his voice shaking the clouds in the sky. This trip was not in vain. Chapter 1455. Dou Zhao felt that this trip was worth it. Jiang Wang, however, felt very weak. At this moment, he was extremely weak. The injuries caused by the 5 decays of the celestial being were still worsening in his body. Speaking of which, he had saved Zhuo Guangshu and Yu Tiannu, protected the orange song Jade Annulus, and successfully escaped. But in truth, it was just that Dou Zhao's thirst for battle was greater than the 9 Jade Annulus, so he did not attack Zhuo Guangshu again. Otherwise, Jiang Wang would not have been able to stop him. Dou Zhao was powerful in all aspects, with almost no weak points. Not only was his cultivation superior, his saber skills were superior, and even his combat talent was top-notch. Even if he did his best, all he could do was flee. There was absolutely no chance of victory. Only now did he have the time to treat his injuries. At this moment, he sat cross-legged on the head of the mechanical Maharaga, outside the golden light of the storm. It was like looking at the world through a window, a kind of haze. This snake-headed Maharaga carried the meditating Yu Tiannu in its left hand and the unconscious Zhuo Guangshu in its right as it traveled through the storm. All three were heavily injured, and no one could help the other. The 5 enormous fingers on the Maharaga's left hand were bent, like Yu Tiannu's divine throne. She closed her eyes and focused, her face glowing with Zen light as she did her best to repair her soul. Jiang Wang was rather curious about this outstanding disciple of the cleansing moon nunnery. At the same time, he was somewhat embarrassed by the stench that constantly emanated from his body. But when he saw Yu Tiannu's expressionless face, he finally understood. With her puppet body, even if she had a sense of smell, it was only an auxiliary perception in battle. She would not really feel anything for smells or smells. Why was a Tianjiao of the cleansing moon nunnery like Yu Tiannu, someone who could form a relationship with the 1,000-year-old Chu clan of Great Chu, a puppet body? What kind of story was behind this? Jiang Wang discarded these random thoughts that suddenly flitted through his mind. His 5 hearts turned to the sky, and he similarly closed his eyes to treat his injuries. Dirty clothes, withered hair, sweaty armpits, stinky body, and unhappy self. These were the 5 decays of the celestial being. The celestial being's lifespan was nearing the end, thus the 5 decays. Dou Zhao's saber strike did not directly hit Jiang Wang. Otherwise, he would not have lasted until now. However, if the 5 decays were allowed to continue to worsen, they could only walk towards death step by step. After all, the power of the 5 decay that had entered his body was just the aftermath of the great battle back then. If he didn't deal with it in time, it could still kill people. If he really calmed down and focused on resisting it, there are some ways. For example, mobilizing Tao energy, spreading it throughout his body, coming into contact with every strand of the 5 signs of decay, splitting, wrapping, and reconciling them bit by bit. This was a slow process, but it was also a relatively safe process. With Jiang Wang's fine control of Tao energy, it was enough for him to do this. However, He did not choose to do so. Instead, he used the Red Heart's immortal light to protect his vitals. Then he directly mobilized the true samadhi fire in his body to surround, block, and kill them all. Rumble. There were occasional claps of thunder in the wind and rain, turning one's body into a battlefield, burning and killing in every corner where the power of 5 decay wreaked havoc. This was, of course, a painful process. Jiang Wang even vomited blood during the process. The blood was black and smelled fishy. The injuries in his body were not only related to the saber force of the Deva's 5 decay, but also to the Samadhi true fire. The substantial Abhijna fire was moving in his body. No matter how well he controlled it, he could not avoid being injured. Using methods to worsen his injuries to prevent them from worsening was like using strong medicine for a serious illness. If he was not careful, he would die. Fortunately, he had just erected the second star tower, and his body had been strengthened again. Otherwise, he would not be able to withstand it now. However, other than his slightly furrowed brows, there was no expression on his face. He was already used to enduring pain. "Why don't you wait for a while? Wait until I'm better. I have a way to heal your injuries," Yu Qiannu suddenly said. While she was meditating, she also caught sight of the intense battle in Jiang Wang's body. That kind of pain she could understand. Jiang Wang opened his eyes and looked at her. He was slightly surprised, but he still shook his head. "It's too late. Continue to burn, continue to suffer, continue to vomit blood. Such a choice, such a tolerance." Too late? Yu Qiannu seemed to have understood something from this sentence. She did not say anything, but also chose some relatively radical methods to heal herself silently. Jiang Wang observed his surroundings. While maintaining his vigilance, he also diverted some of the pain. At this time, the true samadhi fire in his body had already surrounded all the 5 decrees and was burning them away. There was no need for him to focus all his attention. Yu Qiannu had chosen a very clever time to speak. Jiang Wang felt that for some reason, she had not been able to exert her strength to the fullest. Otherwise, she should have been able to cause Do Zhao a little more trouble. His body was truly in pain. He instinctively thought of all sorts of ways to relieve it. "It truly is too late," a voice said in the wind and rain. It pierced through the curtain of rain and resounded in his ears. The mechanical Maharaja froze. Its massive body, shrouded in golden light, stood upright under the gloomy sky, exuding a cold and hard aura. Jiang Wang and Yu Qiannu both sat cross-legged. They were both clear-headed people and knew what was most important at a time like this. The more strength they could recover, the more likely they would have. As for the appearance of a newcomer, they would eventually see it. The curtain of rain was like a curtain of beads. 2 people rolled up the curtain and walked through the air. They walked right in front of the mechanical Maharaja. Of course, they were also in the field of vision of Jiang Wang, who was sitting cross-legged on the snake's head. One of them was not very good-looking. He wore a robe and a crown of virtue on his head. A black butterfly rested on his left shoulder. The other was also wearing a crown of virtue, but it was a crown cast from iron. He wore armor, and his eyes, one big and one small, were inexplicably coordinated and could even be called good-looking. The newcomer naturally did not come with good intentions. The one who spoke was the one wearing the robe. Jiang Wang had already seen him on the river viewing platform and recognized him as Guchuan from Tianjiao of the State of Yu. Then the one with the big and small eyes wearing armor next to him was definitely Wu Ling. In order to avoid the other's vigilance, he stopped vomiting blood. "A friend has come from afar. This Jiang is too injured to welcome you. Please excuse me." Wu Ling's personality was probably more direct. He ignored Jiang Wang's greetings and only looked at him, his gaze full of interest. "How did you guess?" Since the other was willing to chat, Jiang Wang was also happy to say a few more words. "The Mountain Sea realm is so big. I originally thought that it would be very difficult for me to find Guangshu and the others," he said. "But I keep having this indescribable feeling that he's in this direction, waiting for me to find him. Haha, he's actually here. Don't you think it's a coincidence?" Guchuan smiled slightly. Sometimes inspiration come suddenly like this? What is this also worthy of suspicion? He continued to walk forward. It seems that you're a suspicious person. Jiang Wang thought that perhaps this so-called inspiration was Guchuan's method, which was why he said this. Perhaps it's not worthy of suspicion. He smiled weakly. I'm just maintaining vigilance in a damned place like the Mountain Sea realm. What he didn't say was that when this inspiration appeared, it was resisted by the red heart divine ability and had no effect on him at all. He just purposely followed this inspiration, wanting to see who was behind it. When he arrived and saw the scene of Zhuo Guangshu falling into the sea, he naturally couldn't restrain himself and directly pulled out his sword to join the battle. At first, he thought that this sudden inspiration might be Dou Zhao's method. Someone as prideful as Dou Zhao might have scattered bait to lure all his competitors over to kill them. But after successfully escaping, he overturned this guess. Because when he escaped, he didn't encounter Dou Zhao's backup plan. This meant that the place where the battle took place was not the battlefield that Dou Zhao had planned. Jiang Wang asked himself, if he had lured people over to kill them, he would have more or less set up something nearby. Since this sudden inspiration wasn't Dou Zhao's method, then where was the person who had truly set up the trap and led them to fight? As the Oriole, of course, he would only appear after the battle. He could only be blocking their way out. But this distance couldn't be too close because this person definitely didn't want to be discovered by him or Dou Zhao in advance. In Jiang Wang's judgment, it should be a place like this. He had already instructed Yu Qiannu to make the mechanical Kuroga fly as swiftly as possible, but frankly speaking, it was normal for it to be stopped. The person who had set this trap couldn't possibly not be able to stop a puppet. Why did he choose such a violent method? Directly using the Samadhi true fire to burn away the 5 decrees in his body. He was fighting for time. He was using pain to fight for an opportunity. At this moment, Wu Ling said, maintaining vigilance is a good habit. I hope you know that it's also the same for assessing the situation. As Jin Xian and Guan Gu spoke, they approached. They were probably using some method to eliminate any possible arrangements within their range. Facing this person who could directly clash with Dou Zhao and then escape, they did not conceal their vigilance. Of course, Jiang Wang somewhat painfully furrowed his brows. It seemed like he was completely unable to suppress his injuries, but it also seemed like he was doing it on purpose, a kind of disguise to appear weak. In short, he was deliberately mystifying, making it difficult for others to judge. Then, with a frank expression and a smile, he said, if the two of you have any thoughts, feel free to speak. If there's anything I can do to help, I will be happy to do so. To the Mountain Sea realm, we are all passers-by. We should help each other. Brother Jiang is truly a strange man with a very good understanding. Gusu laughed. Then we'll be shameless and speak frankly. Please give me your jade discs, and I will guarantee that you will safely leave the Mountain Sea realm without harming your origin. As you said, we are all passers-by of the Mountain Sea realm. There is no need to form grudges. Brothers, why didn't you say so earlier? Jiang Wang's face was bitter. Look at us. We are dead, injured, and escaped. How can we keep the jade discs in Dou Zhao's hands? They were all taken by that guy. He was both angry and sad. Suddenly, he seemed to think of something. His eyes lit up, and he shouted, Dou Zhao has a total of 3 9-chapter jade discs, but he is already heavily injured. Brothers, how can we miss this opportunity? You must know that if we don't take what the heavens give us, we will be punished. Yu Qiannu blinked. She looked at Jiang Wang's face and suddenly realized that this was indeed a very three-dimensional and difficult-to-describe person. Before she had seen this person, she had only heard of his name and knew that he was a famous genius in the modern world. When she first saw this person, she felt that he had probably just experienced something. There was a kind of clarity, and he appeared very relaxed beside Zhuo Guangshu. Later, when they encountered Dou Zhao's army, she saw his decisiveness and responsibility. Today, he appeared like a heavenly soldier, and she was pleasantly surprised. Facing Dou Zhao alone was enough to see his bravery, and successfully escaping showed his wisdom. Now, He was lying without changing his expression and did not hide his elegance, which made him a bit more adorable. She suddenly remembered True Jade's evaluation. True Jade said that this person was naive and hateful. Hateful indeed, she thought. Gufeng looked at Jiang Wang's emotional performance, thought for a moment, and then looked at Wu Ling. What he said seems to make sense. In order to avoid being detected, of course, they could not directly monitor the battlefield. They only set up a few observation points at a distance to stop the escapees at any time. They only knew that Jiang Wang had successfully escaped with his people, but they did not know the specific situation of the battle. Jiang Wang was very anxious. I will show you the way. Brothers, you must be careful of Do Zhao's 5 decay of heaven and man. It is really dangerous. Gufeng looked at him doubtfully. Aren't you a bit too enthusiastic? Jiang Wang said hatefully. Ever since I made my debut, I have never suffered such a big loss. I hate this person to the bone. I must kill him quickly and cut off his soul origin. He even said, if you don't mind, I can kill this person with you. Wu Ling did not say anything. He just silently took out his 9 jade walls and inserted his Tao energy. This jade wall instantly shone with brilliance, and a poem called Drawing Thoughts was reflected in the air, the words floating. The right palm of the mechanical Maharaga was still on the unconscious Zhua Guangshu. Although the jade wall could not be seen, a beam of brilliance leaped out, reflecting a poem called Ode to Orange. It could be seen clearly in the air, floating with the air of literature. The 2 jade walls resonated with each other in the air, extremely beautiful. Jiang Wang, Yu Qianu, Gufeng, Wu Ling in the dark curtain of rain, there was a moment of awkwardness. At this time, Yu Qianu stood up. The damage to her soul was not so easy to recover from. Even if she took precious secret medicines, she would still need some time to recover. The power of her pure land was even more difficult to recover. At the very least, before her soul recovered, she could not use it again. Thus, she did not have enough strength right now. But she understood that there was no time to recover. She was already prepared to fight to the death. But Jiang Wang still sat cross-legged. He clearly felt that there was still a need to negotiate. He sincerely looked at Gufeng and Wu Ling. This is a misunderstanding. I also didn't think that this jade wall would still be on Guangshu. I thought that Do Zhao fellow had stolen it. Gufeng and Wu Ling only coldly looked at him, silently approaching. Jiang Wang seemed to have been possessed by Su Xiangqian. He urgently said, Brother Gu, Brother Wu, we're all people of repute. We really shouldn't be so distant. I see that you're also the sons and daughters of heroes, gentlemen, well-read people. I presume that you don't want to take advantage of others. How about this? Wait a day for me. Once I recover, I'll immediately fight with you. Let's have a gentleman's fight. We'll use strength to decide who these 2 jade walls belong to. Don't you only have one? Gufeng couldn't help but ask. He also counted hours, Wu Ling said coldly. Even though Gufeng always had the mentality of watching a play, he couldn't hold it in anymore. He immediately raised his hand. Densely packed, little gray insects gushed out. Like a flood, they charged straight at Jiang Wang. Wu Ling pushed his virtuous crown, grasped the scholarly weasel brush, and spread out the scholarly scroll. Splendid light, caves, heavy clouds tore apart the curtain of rain. 10,000 li of rivers and mountains were all under the brush. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.